But Thursday I should see my cousin.
We're on the air. Okay.
And I can sit out in front and listen to the TV.
This is the October 18th Committee of the Whole meeting for the City of Rolling Meadows. Tonight we do have a full agenda. We're going to start off with the ComEd report. However, I'm going to juggle the agenda a little bit. We're going to move the library budget to number 2 from number 3 since we have members of the board and their volunteers here tonight, and I'm assured that it will go quite quickly because it'll move on. So, ComEd, you are on. Thank you for coming back.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Cynthia Thomas with ComEd, External Affairs Manager. So nice to see everybody here again this evening. This has become tradition now. So tonight we're going to go over the annual report, and I have a couple of updates for you as well. And I have been trained on the clicker. I'm all excited about that.
Okay.
So, there's our agenda. We're going to talk about 2015 reliability, 2015 and 16 enhancements. I'm going to talk about smart meters, show you our communication channels, and then talk a little bit about the LED program that Rolling Meadows is signed up for. Okay, and I'm assuming everybody has the charts there. So this is the metrics for 2015. The top part of the page is what we call SAFE. That is the average number of interruptions is the top half of the page. The bottom half is the length of those interruptions. The left-hand side is storm, and the right-hand side is when we are non-storm. So what this shows you year over year is how we're doing. And in Rolling Meadows for 2015, we had the best year ever in SAFE, which is the average number of interruptions. So as an example, if you look up here, you'll see 0.8 for 2015 for storm, when we're in storm mode, and you'll see 1.35 for 2014. So we had a really significant improvement. When you look at the bottom of the chart, you do see that in non-storm mode, we had a little bit of an increase there for the average length of interruptions, but overall, we continue to really see improvements based on the work that we're doing, improving the system. Next page is the outage frequency by cause. Improvements in nearly all the categories as you look there. We go from 2011 through 2015 with the most improvements seen in underground cable equipment. We've done quite a bit in terms of replacing cable and refurbishing the cable where that's appropriate. This page is a circuit map. We include it every year. It's just for your reference. System improvements. So this page here talks about distribution automation. That's equipment that we put on our lines to help customers. That helps us bring customers up quickly if there is an outage. So we call them DA devices. In 2015, we installed 3, and in 2016, we installed 3, and those are already done. The next page will give you, it's a reference to those circuits that I just talked about. So you'll see Echo 0213, that's the area, and that's going to reference back to the page I was just talking about. Again, just to show you the locations where we have those DA devices at. Okay, cable replacement. And I've got a little bit of a story here for mainline underground cable and our diagnostic on the cable. One of the things I want to speak quickly about, because we got some concerns around Adams Street, and we talked about that. That area is served by Echo 0217, which is on this page. So we had several underground cable faults, which our reliability team has been monitoring. For this year, we had 2 faults in 2016, but we had 6 in 2015. Yeah, I know. So really, the customers were not very happy over in that area. So what we have done, just last month, we replaced this cable. So I'm expecting that you should be getting no more calls about, this sort of thing. But I also want to quickly give you an update on everything we've done for that circuit. Let's see, so we just replaced the cable in 2016. We had overhead thermal inspections completed June of last year. Mainline underground testing was done in both April 2015 and May 2013. Corrective maintenance on 7 items on that line has been completed since 2012. Cichlid vegetation management, we trimmed February 2014. And then for distribution automation, we installed DA devices on that line in 2013. So, as always, we'll keep looking for different things and working our way backwards, worst performing circuit forward, but we did see that this was also an issue, so hopefully we should see some better performance going forward. Okay. For maintenance, for Cichlid circuit inspections, I included this page. You can see the circuits that we worked on and the corrective actions, the circuits that we worked on, and the number of corrective actions that we found on each of those circuits, again, for your reference. In vegetation management, we worked on 1 line this year. We did on a full circuit for this year, Echo 5317 Yankee. Before I move on to the next piece, any questions on reliability itself or anything that I need to take back? Yes, sir.
Hi, Cynthia. I was wondering, you have those circuits, you replaced the 6 of them? I'm sorry, what do you call them here?
The DA devices?
Yeah. So I noticed that some of those are outside of Rolling Meadows, which I understand that they still help us.
Yes.
Is there a lot more of those that need to be replaced in our area, or are we up to date? Are we covered?
There's going to be a few more. I don't know where they're going to land, though, until, they finished the 2017 plan in December. I get to see it early in the year, so I bring it to you like a few months after that.
Well, we can expect a few of them to be replaced. A few more this year will be replaced.
Yeah, you can expect a few more of those, and even some more of the underground cable to happen. I just don't know which circuits yet till they see what's performing the worst, if you would.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And just for a quick clarification, just for folks at home, a DA actually works by, if power is failing, it tries switching to another area. So it tries to keep electricity flowing to that area. So you might see a flicker, but it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And obviously you can see that we have one very close to Fire Station 15 that it has done that numerous times. But again, the DAs are specifically to make sure that there's going to be a flow coming. It just doesn't always work if every line is down. So.
Thank you for that, Barry. That's a very good clarification. We recently had a situation where I got a call, hey, this is gone off and on 3 times. And when that's happening, there's a break in the line somewhere, and it's trying to come back on. And it'll try it 3 times. And hopefully, we can bring up as many customers as possible. If there's something that we have to send a truck out for, time number 3, then it goes down altogether. But it tries 3 times to stay up so that we can keep as many customers on service as possible. Anything else on reliability? Just a few more slides here. I wanted to give you a quick smart meter update. Total number of meters in Rolling Meadows was 11,492. Total meters installed to date is 10,399. We have a little bit over 1,000 left to do, which our team is trying to get those finished up by the end of the year. And then I just wanted to give you a quick look at what refusals look like and what the reasons were. We've only had, we actually had 8, and then we had someone to change their mind, so now it's 7. So we had 1 who cited health reasons, 1 who gave us multiple reasons, no reason, and other, which, we just don't have a category for. They just told us no at this time. So if there is any updates or when there's updates regarding those customers who've refused meters, I will certainly, be talking to the city about that, if we have any changes to that. This is our power of self-service information. Like everybody else, we're tweeting and Facebooking and all that good stuff. So this page just gives you an idea of how we're doing in social media. So we have overall our transactions are up, with outage alert transaction being the only one that's down a little bit last year over the year before. Just FYI for you. This page, again, is for reference. This is the power of self-service, all the different channels that customers can talk to us. I always include this and make sure we have any updates in here, so that's also there for you. Okay, so we have a LED program that Rolling Meadows just signed up for. This is where we're going to make all the ComEd-owned lights smart ready with LED lights. No fee to the village at all. Yay to, so there should be some clapping or something, but that's okay. So there you go. Well, we're real happy to be able to bring this one. So I just wanted to give you just a high level of what's happening now. So in this month, we will be confirming the location for all the fixtures. So we have, a truck that goes by and maps every single thing, which is really kind of cool because not only is it to tell us where everything is, if we have any changes in our records, we can make the adjustments once we get this information. Now, in November, once I have this information, I'm going to feed it back to Barry and Company and ask them to look over it and make sure that they don't have any questions or any changes. They have to kind of put a stamp and say, okay, you guys are good. Once we get that done, then we will schedule to have the lights installed. After all the installs are done, then we work on the billing to get everything credited, and then you can see the savings from changing those lights out. So we're looking to start west of 53 and make our way east. That's our plan right now, and I'll just keep in touch with you in terms of what that timing is. Wait, I got one more.
The end?
Thank you.
Does
Thank
anyone from the council have any other questions or thoughts? Go ahead. Shannon.
I just have one, this is not a complaint, but it's a concern that some people out in my area have.
Yes, sir.
Refresh you, I live off of Quinton.
Okay.
You guys have poles on the west side of Quinton, and probably every month or two, someone calls me or I see them, they say, hey, those poles on Quinton look like they're going to fall down any day. And I know they're not, but they really tilt in. And I wouldn't expect you to know that, but if you go out there, I don't know if it's anything you should be concerned about, but they do look awfully strained.
Well, I tell you what, because our poles can take quite a bit of lean,
Sure.
as you know. But I have had customers to call those in, or the villagers to call me about them, and I'll send a tech out to take a look, because we do want to make sure they're safe, and if there's something going on, we want to address it. So most cases, they go out and they say, Cynthia, it's good, and then the customers can relax about it. But every now and again, they'll say, oh, that would need some attention, and we put it in the work plan. So if you have something that you're particularly concerned about, you can send me a note, or if you prefer, the residents can call the 800 number. They'll come out that way too. The first responders come out and take a look and see what's going on, just to make sure.
Okay, great, thanks. And
Okay.
also, thanks for the LED program, we're looking forward to it.
You're very welcome. Sorry I missed the mayor tonight. I'll have to reach out to him directly, but thank you for having me.
So, any final questions? I just want to say thank you on behalf of the second ward, because as you know, we've gone back and forth over transformers being changed and having cables back and forth, so we thank you very much.
You are more than welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, have a good night.
Thank you. Those of you who are tuning in late, I'm Len Prana. I'm the alderman from the second ward. I'm mayor pro temp tonight. Just so the mayor, we hope, will come here later on tonight, but the Cubs game is on, I'm told, so we'll see what happens. I'm pulling a little audible on the agenda for tonight. Brookwood was set to be next, but we're going to go to the library budget. So if you could be so kind, Dave, come on up.
Just want to thank you for letting me come over to talk about the budget a little bit tonight. I want to point out that we have a couple of our board members, three I see here now, President Dick Wright, Eunice Semple, Sylvia Vange, and some of our staff as well. So thank you for letting us come over and talk. While we have a second here, I see it's not quite up yet, I do want to mention before I get too far in here, because I might not get a chance to address you again, every year I talk about the support that you, the city, and your staff have given us, and this year has been exceptional because we've had a lot more going on. I know Chief Nowacki has been over to help us do security reviews and keep the building safe. Scott Fransgroth's folks have been over whenever we had a health situation going on. We're starting to get Val Diener really involved in helping us get ready for an expansion that we're excited about, but she's explaining all the ins and outs of the process to us. We did have, on a sadder note, our HR director passed away this year, and when that occurred, we had all sorts of issues making sure that we didn't drop a deadline. And Barry Crumstock and Melissa Gallagher and Joyce DeLeon jumped over and helped us immediately and thoroughly, and we'll remember that. I appreciate it. So. Well, let me get started. If you look at the first screen, and by the way, does everybody have the paper copy of this? If they don't, I know Jenny's got some extras there. Let me say that our goal here was to try to fund the expansion project and keep our levy at or below 3%. What you can see up on that first screen is that's a history of our levy increases, and this year's levy increase looks at a 2.7% increase. This will be our first expansion since 1987, our first bricks and mortar expansion. What that does is it gives us, assuming, if you want to look at the average library property tax per resident, the increase would be about $1.46. To put that in perspective, it's a little more than a small cup of coffee at McDonald's and a lot less than one at Starbucks. So that's the increase that we're looking at. If you look at the next screen, you'll see that although 2016 is sort of normal for us, with about 96% of our funds coming in through property taxes and 4% from all other, next year it's going up to all other funding going up to over 15%, about quadrupling, and that's because we're throwing in the reserve funds that we've been saving for a number of years to be able to do this expansion and to do it with no debt. To create no debt. Now, we did have a second part of the expansion that we looked at. We can't fund it right now, and so therefore we're going to wait until we can. That's a philosophy that the board has had, and it has served us well. The dollar amounts for that same chart, you can see that we're going from all other of 142,000 to almost 696, and that's because we're throwing in 540,000 from our reserves. Well, the library expenditure history you can see there, and you can see the impact of that expansion. I can tell you that if you take the expansion off of there, it's actually pretty much flat, if not just a little bit of a reduction as far as the overall operating funds. Staffing, of course, having discipline on our staffing is very important, and what you can see here is if you have thoughtful staff reductions, you can maintain them. So we don't have staff reductions of 2% one year with an increase of 5% the next year. We try to think carefully about our staffing, and once we see we can make a reduction, we do it, and we maintain it. That allows us to keep personnel expenditures predictable and sustainable, and you can see it in this chart here. Materials, we have a state formula that if you want to be in the system, which allows you to qualify for per capita grants and also reciprocal borrowing, you have to spend at least 12% of your non-local area network, non-capital operating expenditures on materials. That's what we budget. Whenever we have savings during the year, we throw some of those savings into more materials, but the 12% is a minimum number, but it's good because we have a mature collection. In other words, our shelves are filled out, so for every box of books that comes in, a box of books has to go out. The good news is that with e-books and e-materials, the electrons take no additional space, so we can spend a little extra money on that. But the number generally is between $400,000 and $450,000 a year, and we're going to be able to maintain that next year. Speaking of e-materials, I just want to show you that we continue to go ahead and build our e-material collection. That is about a 6% increase in the numbers that we saw between 2014 and 15. Believe believe it or not, some people will say, well, why don't you just spend quadruple the amount on e-materials? Not everything is available on e-material. Now, every year more and more is available, but not everything. So sometimes we have e-materials, especially that we would like to pick up in certain areas that aren't yet published. So, but we are making you see the increase since 2010, a big move. And this takes us up to about, at the beginning of this year, about 2,700 items, and we've been adding to it. It's paid off in circulation. That's about an 18% increase in circulation. So double-digit increases on circulation for e-material is very helpful. I should say that the e-materials come in different flavors. Some have no limits at all as to how many times you can check them out, and some are called metered materials, which have a certain number of checkouts, and then they go away. And so we have about 70% of the stuff that we have is no limit at all, and about 20% is metered. And that's the breakdown there. All righty. So operating funds, I think we already can see that the impact of that $830,000 expected project on the expansion is having a big impact on the operating funds. It's the second big thing we've had in 2 years. You may remember that back in 2015, we replaced the chiller units that had not been replaced since 1987. So that turned out well. Again, funded the same way. We've saved up our money, we paid for it when we could, and then we waited until we could save up enough money to do the next project. Okay, here's the next project. The patrons have given us a number of requests over the years, but by far the one that is the most requested is small group meeting rooms. We have, as you know, if you're in the library, we have a big room upstairs that seats 170, and we have a small room that seats about 20, and we have nothing in between and nothing on the main floor, and it really has affected some of the things that we can offer. So it's not so much that we need a lot more square footage, but this square footage is going to give us new capabilities that we have not had in the past. Second thing people ask for is some vending. And so we're going to try to put some vending into this garden lounge area. Of course, we will choose things that don't stain the carpets. So if you have any suggestions, let us know. The last thing is that more and more we're seeing now that we have wireless set up in the library, people want to have study spaces and seating spaces that are wrapped in technology so that they can use their mobile devices and they can recharge them. We don't currently have anything to do that. The garden lounge will assist us in that. So what you see is in the bottom left of that picture there, that's where the garden lounge and the small group study rooms will be. There is something there on the top right, and that is a receiving room expansion so that we can store our book sale books and have a proper place for the friends to prepare their book sale. But we don't have the money for that right now, so that one we're just going to defer until we can do it in a thoughtful manner and have the money. There's what it looks like now, and if you look at the bottom left of the building there, you see the rock garden with the tree. It's that area that we're focusing in, and when the project is done, it should look like that. And here's the high-tech presentation part of my presentation. There's before, and there's after. So things that we want to point out is that we're just going to continue to use the brick colonnades so that it all looks very natural to the building. And hopefully when we're done, when you see the exterior, you won't go, oh my God, look at that expansion that they just chalked onto the building. It'll look like it was meant to be that way. There's what it would look like from the front. And the good news is on this that we're staying within the footprint of the building, the existing footprint. So we're not coming any closer to the sidewalk than we already are. We're just filling in a space that we think we can make better use of. Okay, there's the diagram itself. And if you look at the green area down on the bottom left, you'll see the garden lounge. To the right of that, you'll see 2 small group meeting rooms. And those should be, again, very popular, I would think, with students that want to study, people that are working perhaps in the community. I think it'd be nice to offer some of this to our business community. If they need a place to have a meeting, this should be very good. If you look at the green shaded area there, the garden lounge, what you will see is that on the very bottom of the thing, you'll see a counter, a white counter area. That's where you're going to be able to use your mobile devices, plug in and recharge. There will be a fireplace on the left edge there, the west edge. Vending on the very top, the north edge. And because this will be right there where there's all that cut-through traffic that we have, I think it'll be very, very good advertising for us to show people that we have things going on. The vending, we're going to be able to build into cabinetry, close it off if we want to have a special event in that room. It'll give us a little flexibility. So you might see an author, a book signing or something like that in there, and it will give us much more flexibility to offer things that we don't currently have. There's the interior if you were standing at the southwest corner. What you would see looking into the garden lounge to your right along those counters, and that high seating is where the charging stations will be. You can see on the left side of that picture the fireplace. You would look all the way across the room to see vending, and we'll try to keep the noise and all of that over there. And then through the glass doors back into the reference area. Notice also the clear story up above, and that northern exposure will let in some light. There'll also be some glass on the southern exposure to let in some light. There's what it looks like from the relocated reference desk looking at the garden lounge, which would be to your left, and looking straight into the 2 small group study rooms. We're going to move the reference desk back because the center of gravity for that room is about to move back, and there's going to be a lot more activity. And that's what we think, not that table particularly, but that's what we think the small group study area would look like. So we're thinking the elements would include a whiteboard, big screen TV where you could plug your laptop in, put anything you want up on the screen, and groups could actually work and communicate with each other. We're finding that with libraries, we are, I think there was a day when libraries were primarily a warehouse full of materials. And now, more and more, it's a place where people are meeting to consume the materials together and to discuss them. And so having some flexibility to allow them to do that is going to be a big thing for us. And there we're back to the beginning. We're looking again at delivering that expansion with 2.7% levy increase, no debt. Any questions? We can go a little deeper into all these things if you'd like.
Anyone from council have questions, comments? Yes, Mr. Diastis.
Dave, you, Dick, the board, as in past years, you guys have done a tremendous job. I think your budget, your levy looks great, and I'm excited to see the build out. So my congratulations to you and your team, the board. It looks fantastic to me. Thank you very much for all that you do for the community.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Banger, sir.
Thank you. This is actually my second time through this slideshow. I'm the city council liaison to the library, which is a fun job, I'll put it that way. I might be their #1 customer, especially when I had little kids. And I just wanted to chime in, as Mr. Diastis did. Great group of people, starting from the director down through the board. I go to these meetings, and there are very thoughtful questions being asked about this project, for example. Dave does a great job of laying out the budget, and I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years now, and it's very presented so I can understand it as well as the board. I went on a field trip last October with the library, so I met a lot of the staff on our way down to Momence, Illinois, and I had a blast, and I got to know, a lot of the staffers there. It is just a top-notch operation over there. I've also heard wonderful things from Dave and the board about as Dave mentioned, our city staff jumping in when Pat passed away. And so big kudos to our city staff. You know, we work well across the street. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to say I'm excited about this expansion, but we've got a great organization over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the council? Mr. Alderman Judd.
Thanks, sir. Just three things. You mentioned with the e-materials that 70% you own and you can check out forever.
Right.
And the other 20%, I don't know what the other 10 was, but 20% is metered. What happens? Do you have to repurchase then at a discount,
Yes.
or is it just you just have to repurchase it?
Depends on the company, but yes, you have to repurchase them then.
Okay. And then the meeting rooms, is that wall movable? Are you making that wall movable so that you can put the two meeting rooms together, or?
No, we're not. It is going to be a sort of a frosted glass area so that we want to make sure that we get the most mileage out of it. Now, if somebody needs something as big as two of those rooms together, we do have the boardroom upstairs. And if they need something even bigger, we have the community room as well. So we want to retain these things so that they neither become the world's biggest study carrel. We wouldn't want just one person in there, nor do we want them to become our workhorse larger group meeting rooms. So we're going to try to hold them for groups of 5 or 6 people.
Gotcha. The only other question I have is the health insurance. You've got a reduction of 8%, but it looks like, your payroll's basically the same. How were you able to achieve that?
Well, it depends on any given year who chooses which type of coverage, for one thing. Also, the mix of who we have. For instance, we can have, we had 59 employees, now we have 58. There's a 1.2% reduction in staffing. And so not everybody qualifies for insurance. And then if you have more people taking the opt-out, which is 2/3 of an HMO single, then that too will reduce your costs. So it is always dealing with the mix of who's choosing what and how many there are to choose.
No real change in plan or anything like that, just change in the
No, we have the
personnel.
same insurance that the city has.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Beanbass, sir.
Yeah, real quickly, just to echo some of the other aldermen, you've done a great job managing this entire library for years, and it's obvious to all of us. As being a business person myself, I know how hard it is to contain your cost as well as lower the labor in your facility to still be able to provide a lot of great services. My children have used the library extensively over the years, and it's always been a very uplifting place to go. And from what you're expanding now, I think this will just add that much more to it. The Creekside Association, which I'm a part of on that board, they use your meeting rooms upstairs, the boardroom, and that's a tremendous asset for us to use a place that's independent where people can come and talk. So I think it's a great idea to add the meeting rooms along the way. So you're moving into a different area, it looks like, with the new different types of media everybody's using. So you're trying to keep up with the times too. You're funding it yourself. I mean, it's a great story, and everybody should hear it.
Well, I thank you. I want to point the obvious out, though. I don't do any of this stuff myself. We got a great staff, and the board sets the philosophy that we all work to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kudos to everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone else? Alderman Majakis.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just curious, what are the target dates with the construction and the completion?
Well, I'm sure that they won't change it all. Valerie has
They'll
told
be
me for
exact,
sure.
right?
Yes, to be exact.
Yeah.
We're going to put the shovels in the ground, we hope, in May. We hope we'll be done by early August, and we hope to invite you all over for a ribbon cutting at about 10 a.m. on August the 27th, which is a Sunday.
Let me mark my calendar.
Don't write that one in.
Don't
And
write.
Valerie guaranteed that it's all going to happen just like that.
No pressure.
Right.
All right. I'm excited.
Fall
Thank
of
you.
27 days.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, I would echo what other council members have said, and I have had the opportunity to be there for Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I just want you to know, I mean, last time I think I was next to Alderman Banger and Alderman Majakis, and it seemed that I got the longest pages, no matter what happens. So what happens. So thank you. If there's no other questions, thank you for your presentation. Thanks for the board. Eunice, thank you for coming out. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Brookwood, but to give a moment, Fred, if you want to present, because we do have someone who has signed in, but I think it'd be appropriate for you to come forth with what your ideas and what you have.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We last had discussion on Brookwood back in May of this year when the proposed ordinance to establish a special service area was postponed indefinitely. That's still the status. There was a request to provide more information to the potentially affected public, specifically the Jody Court, Colleen Court, Cole Court residents in that area. Staff put together a series of pieces of information from our files, history, tried to update that, sent that information. Actually, first we had the public meeting on August 24th. It was well attended by residents in that area. We followed up by preparing meeting minutes and distributed that on or about October 1st and informed the residents in that area that we were having this meeting tonight at the Committee of the Whole for the next level of discussion. Our city engineer, Gary Rozwadowski, who was present representing Christopher Burke at the public meeting in August, is here if there's any technical questions as we get into discussion tonight. I wasn't planning to go through the technical issues or the financial issues specifically. Again, those are in the meeting minutes. They're provided within this packet. If any alderman wants to talk about anything specifically regarding the technical or financial issues as we presented them, we can certainly do that. Just to kind of highlight overall, we're looking to improve the existing stormwater detention at what we call the Brookwood facility, which is at the south end of the Brookwood condo property and at the far north end of the White Oaks development, or the north side of Jody Court. The 2012 study by the city engineer indicates that the stormwater storage is 0.3 acre feet deficient in Brookwood and 0.8 acre feet deficient within the White Oaks or the Jody Court area. We have looked over the years at several different options for solutions. One of the questions that was raised at the public information meeting in August was, should we look elsewhere to have some other expertise analyze that? I did have an opportunity to talk with a, I'll say, competitive engineering company in the Chicagoland area who was, we were talking to them about some other projects potentially, and they kind of jumped on the opportunity to take a few hours and look at the reports, look at the area. What they came back with a couple weeks later was that no, they felt that our city engineer did a thorough job of analyzing and trying to identify solutions. They came up with a couple of what I'd call minor technical comments and suggestions that we'll certainly look at as we move, and if we move forward with improvements. So we did do that. I'll point out again that as it stands, and there are several different cost scenarios that we put together for the residents at that meeting that we distributed. I've put together some additional ones tonight in the packet to kind of calculate several different ways how a $200,000 estimated project to do the stormwater improvements could be funded. A lot depends on how much the city wishes to put into the project. We have for several years carried anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 as the city share. That amount, albeit was came up with several years ago when the project cost estimate was less. We obtained about 6 years ago now a
$75,000 grant opportunity from the state, but that has been suspended. It's still alive, which is the good news. If the state ever chooses to fund that, we did ask for and got approval for an extension into 2017 for that grant, again, if it ever is funded. And we really don't know whether it ever will be funded. But that is a potential source to deflect some of the costs to the city or to the residents, or a combination of both. One of the questions that was asked at this public meeting back in August was, well, how did the city determine that the residents should pay for any of this, given that the developer back in the late 80s, early 90s had an approved site plan, had approved engineering drawings, and failed to provide the proper stormwater detention? Shouldn't some of the burden in that regard be on the city? So I point that out as a part of the discussion, to which I certainly don't have an answer to, but did take that question as a legitimate question, and one that caused us to look at a couple of different scenarios, shall I call them, in terms of different ways that the funding could be split out over time. Again, what we've done averages anywhere from $70 per year if carried out over a 20-year period, up to $140 a year. And then with or without the grant would change some of those finances. What we're looking for tonight from a staff standpoint is simply to, I guess, have some consideration and discussion on how, as a city, we would want to proceed with the funding of it. We have in the past, for a number of years, had what we call a rear yard drainage program. The city tends to fund smaller projects at a 50% level. We have had 2 special service areas that the city specifically put in 50% of the cost for. One was storm sewer improvement on Kirchhoff Road about 15 years ago. The second being the water main improvements, phase 1 up in the North Industrial Park. So there is some precedent for considering funding up to that point, but certainly that's not a staff decision. That's something that the council needs to consider. Ultimately, we would hope that once that discussion is had and that direction is provided, that we can go into some more specifics on the finances and what the impacts would be to the residents if a special service area were created, and then have that discussion at a later date, perhaps as early as next month if council so desires. So that's where we are right now with this project.
Okay, I just have one quick question, because Alderman Wiedenhaus and I seem to have this ball in the middle of our 2 courts. The $75,000 just sort of seems to be, grants just seems to be kicked back down the road, so we've been fortunate we still have it. We just don't know what's going to happen with it. It's still out there in play.
It was formally suspended in June of 2015 when the state failed to establish a budget. In June of, or July of this year, when the state did a stopgap budget, we were informed by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity that the grant is still officially alive. However, they've been given no direction as to if and when it'll be funded. So we were asked if we wanted an extension, to which we immediately replied yes. And at this point, it is still a potentially funded project until, I believe, at least June of 2017.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Questions, comments?
Any of the audience?
Any? What? Okay, all right. We did have someone who did sign in, Mr. Jim Grassley. Can you step forward, please? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Mayor and City Council. Before I start, before my phone died, it was 0-0 at the top of the 3rd.
So, thank you for the update.
My name again is Jim Grassley. I live at 4108 Jody Court in Rolling Meadows. As As Fred mentioned, on August 24th, the Public Works had a public information meeting regarding the topic of Brookwood. This meeting was very important, especially to the residents that were not aware of the vote that was going to happen and the costs involved with it. However, I was personally disappointed because I was hoping for new ideas or new options. But each time a new option was brought up during that meeting, it would not work to solve the problem or the cost was too expensive. So out of the meeting, the only viable option that we heard was to expand the creek 10 feet south or 20 feet south. If you decide to take the creek 20 feet south, that would take over 45% of my backyard. Think about that. Do you know how many bee colonies I could put in that area? A lot. If you take the creek 10 feet, that would be 23% of our backyard. We hope that you decide not to take any of our backyards. What really concerned me about the meeting was the question was brought up, will this solve the problem? The engineering firm response was, well, it can't make it any worse. I really don't want to lose the property that all our families enjoy and have all our neighbors pay for a large portion of it and not resolve the problem. I ask that we slow down, get Brookwood involved, and we look at what we can do by cleaning the debris, and making the existing creek more effective. Or I would love to see the other options that this other company brought in and see if there's other ways we could go about it. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for coming forward. Questions? Or Fred?
Just if I could with the one thing that Mr. Grassley pointed out with regards to effect of the backyards. For the council's education, if we haven't already brought this up at a past discussion, what the developer did was not build the detention per plan, but did dedicate a 20-foot drainage easement, which is the area that Mr. Grassi is referring to. If we looked to maximize the stormwater detention storage, he's correct that we could utilize 10 to 20 feet of that. It's kind of peculiar out there right now in that the existing fences are a few feet or several feet in from their property line. So part of that area already is within the what we call the Brookwood area. But we've met with several of the homeowners there as recently as last month, and certainly there are ways to minimize that. It certainly might compromise some of the ability to maximize storage, but from a staff standpoint and a city engineer standpoint, we want to try to compromise or try to come somewhere in the middle where we can maximize what it is that we're trying to accomplish while minimizing the effects on the property that they have, because some of the backyards are not very deep in terms of distance from houses or patios and the like to the property line. So something that, as this project would get engineered in the future, we would expect to be working with all of the homeowners and trying to come up with something that is mutually agreeable. We're certainly not going to just go out and take some of their property without them being aware of it. So just point that out.
Thank you, Fred. Mm-hmm. Good. Barry?
Just a few quick comments too. Also, Brookwood has been mentioned, and we still have issues with communication with them. It's an interesting group over there, but at the same point in time, community development has written a few times some nuisance and some cleanup issues, mainly trees and some other issues that are out there at this point in time. But again, sometimes you need a good partner, and we're still having issues with that group that we continue working with. So I know that's one comment that comes every time that we talk about this. So it would be nice if we had a good partner. Still very difficult. They go through, not to be disrespectful, but attorneys every so often. Our city attorney has worked with at least 2 of them, and now 3 of them. But at the same point in time, we continue trying to get them to discuss and deal with their issues, but also be a good neighbor if we can get them to do that.
Thank you, Barry. If you want to stand by, Fred, I'm sure.
Yes, yes.
Mr. Veenbos?
Yeah, thank you, Pro Tem Mayor. I have spent a great deal of time looking at this issue, and I want to, first of all, thank Burke Engineering. I want to thank the residents of Jody Court. I want to thank you, Fred, for working through this issue year after year after year, and also you, Barry, for working through it. And I would, first of all, say that this is not an easy issue to solve. Burke came up with a number of different ideas and different solutions, some very expensive ones, and some not as expensive, and up to and including, affecting people's yards. So I've heard the residents of Jody Court. I understand what you just said too. And I think we need to take some action now as a council with Brookwood. I would like to go forward and have a conversation with them so they can help be part of the solution rather than just the Jody Court people. And I think that's real important that maybe we can, I don't know how to make a motion about that we have some kind of activity from the council to get some movement there. And maybe, Jim, you can give us some advice on that part of it, because both sides need to be a part of it. So that's the first thing I'd like to kind of work our way through. The second one is with respect to dollars, and it came through with all the discussions that way back when this subdivision was put in the 80s, that there were a number of things that weren't done correctly. And whether the city of Rolling Meadows didn't catch them, whatever it is, the records don't seem to be available to see exactly what happened, but some things weren't done right at the end of the day, correct?
It's a good way to put it, yes.
Okay. And despite, Fred, how many years you been here?
20 next week.
20, so it's beyond that. So when we started getting into the issue with, who's going to pay for what, it's going to get kind of skewed because, maybe the developer didn't do things right, and maybe the city didn't catch the developer didn't do things right, and this is not unusual. There's other places, I'm sure, in the city where this has happened. So when we start talking about who pays for what and what percentage of what gets paid for by a resident, there probably needs to be a little bit more study about what that's all about, and I don't think that can be necessarily solved tonight. The third part is this creek that we're talking about. I call it a creek. Would you call it a creek, Fred?
Technically, we've been through that too, particularly with Brookwood. It is not a creek. It is a open ditch storm sewer system. But we understand if it's called a creek.
So it needs to be cleaned out properly. And that should probably be the very first step. I would hope maybe we as a council can give some direction to Fred on, because it needs to be totally cleaned out and see what the effect of that creek will be, number one. And maybe that's some direction that I would like to propose the council to take, because we don't know what effect that will be. We know it's going to be better. I'm not exactly sure what the cost of it's going to be, but I'm talking about the whole lane, not pieces and parts, but go through that. And then maybe, Fred, you can come back to the council and tell us what that costs or how we go about doing that. Barry?
No, I'm waiting my turn, but also please remember that's not our open ditch creek. So
I'm
again,
not done yet.
Jim is going to have to get their attention.
So, in order to clean out this creek, which I believe will be a big part of the solution, we need to get some cooperation from Brookwood, correct?
Yes.
And I would propose to the council too, maybe some action we can take with Jim to help us get the creek cleaned out as the first step. And the way we got to do that is to get Brookwood's attention. If not, give them an olive branch or whatever you want to call it. But we need to get their attention so they can be part of the solution. And it's time for the council to act, I believe. And I'm not exactly sure what kind of motion or proposal that needs to be, but that needs to happen. And now that I've spent enough time in all these different areas, speaking to a lot of incredible citizens here, in order to help them, we need to get both sides, including Brookwood, to move on this. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Mr. Diastis?
Mr. Veenbos put it real delicately. I'm not so delicate. Mr. Grassley, I don't think they should take a foot of your lawn, okay? I don't even think that the people in Jody Court should pay for half of this. They should pay for nothing. I'm not a fan of Brookwood. They've been stalling us and dragging their heels for a long time, and I think the council needs to give direction to do something, like you said. So you were very gentle about it. I'm not going to be so gentle. These people have dragged for a long time. It's time to make them do something, because their lack of doing anything, from cleaning the ditch to talking to us, is aggravating to me as much as it is to you. So I'm on your side on this one. Whatever we have to do, we should do it, and we should do it as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
I'm not a fan of them.
Okay, next. Mr. Bandy.
Thank you. I agree with both my colleagues. The other thing about this, I was coming to the table tonight just wanting to do something, an actual on the ground, and if it's clean up. I thought you were trying to ask if it was a creek or a crick, and it's a crick. But I just want to do something, because every spring comes up for these residents, and you're just terrified. I've got that sense of paranoia each spring too, because Waverly Park is flooded, and it's bad having floodwaters that aren't floodwaters coming up through your toilets and basement drains. And so I want to do something as quickly as possible. We've talked about this for probably 3 years now, and I think it's time to actually do something. If we have to front the money, I'm personally fine doing that and then pursuing it on the back end, as long as some action gets taken. My assumption here is all of these places are at risk for flooding, and it's going to be that same sense of paranoia this coming spring. So the sooner we can get started on this, the better. Also, one thing that struck me as maybe something easy we could do, and again, we'd have to consult with Mr. McCall, but if this outlet gets plugged in the Brookwood detention basin, is there some way we could compel them to keep an eye on it? Because it doesn't sound like something we want to set on our calendar each week to check to see if the silt and the leaves and the branches have plugged it all the time. So I'd like to pursue a way to have them at least maintain that, because it sounds like that's part of the problem. But in summary, I want to do something about this. We can spend money on it from 100% of the city and then sort it out later. These special service areas are just something that I agree, having the impacted areas pay for things, but this is so confusing, and there are so many parcels. When we started slicing and dicing it by subdivision, that's when my eyes started to cross. When it comes down to actual individual homeowners, that's when my eyes start to bleed. I think we should do something about this in a big picture way, like you said, that entire segment of the creek there, and move on and deal with the paperwork back and forth from some reluctant players after the fact. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Fred, I see you jumping up and down, and go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that as a matter of public interest, the Public Works Department for many, many years has had this location on our watch list, the same as we do for streets that are more highly susceptible to flooding, low areas and the like. The Public Works Department has numerous times over the years cleaned out the restrictor area just to make sure that there is the proper water flow. We can't count on Brookwood for doing that, but because of the single-family residents more so than Brookwood, because Brookwood, if it floods, is just their parking lot floods, which certainly should be of some importance to them, because they've had vehicles damaged by that in some of the significant floods. But it is on our watch list, and we check that location regularly, and we'll clean it out as needed, much more so than the property owners do. Just FYI.
Alderman Diastis, go.
Thank you. I know that the ditch is not ours, so we really can't go in there and clean it. So I guess it becomes more of a legal thing. Is Jim, you've looked at this. Is there any advice that you could give us? I mean, I know Mr. Banger says, let's just go fix it and bill somebody later. Is that an option that's available to us? And can we get into the ditch and clean it? What's our legal options at this point, other than sit back and do nothing because the people of Brookwood never respond back to us? I mean, can we compel them to come to court? Can we compel them to adjudication? Is there anything that we can do to force them to come to the table? Because that seems to be the blockade in this whole thing.
Well, what we've suggested and had discussions with them, I shouldn't say them, with the representatives of Brookwood about, consisted of contributions and who's going to contribute what. But part and parcel of that was I did obtain an appraisal of the city obtaining an easement for that portion of the Brookwood property. And I don't remember what the number was, but in any event, we kind of worked that in with the numbers. And so there were discussions along those lines. There may also be a possibility where the city could actually just go in and clean it out, and then possibly seek some sort of recourse. I haven't looked at that in about 2 or 3 years.
And is it possible for us, because this is for the public benefit, to use condemnation?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we got the appraisal. We were trying to work something out because of obviously, and certainly a lot of time has gone by already. But the idea then was, like 2 years ago, at least, the idea was to try and negotiate something, because obviously that process would be much faster than trying to go through court and obtain the easement through a condemnation action.
And so 2 years has gone by, and there's really no progress on the situation from them?
Well, I wouldn't say that. I think we had a meeting at Brookwood a year ago, March, I want to say.
March of 2015.
With their board and some of the unit owners. I was there, Fred was there, Mr. Rozwadowski was there, and we kind of just presented where we're at. And we obviously had discussions with their attorney and members of their board prior to that. Their board actually recommended accepting a city proposal, but that required, under their declaration, it required 2/3 of the unit owners to vote in favor of it. They never got that 2/3 vote, as far as we know. So that was the last hang-up.
And they changed attorneys.
So can we, since another year has gone by, can we begin the condemnation procedure and run a parallel course with their new attorney saying, you need to either get 2/3 or we are starting this procedure, and run them on parallel courses so that we're not cutting them off, but we're saying we've got other residents that cannot wait another year or two. Can we run 2 parallel courses?
Well, that was the plan if an agreement couldn't be reached, but then the issues became when the ordinance for the creation or proposal for the special service area was first presented, and then to just table or postpone indefinitely. My plan was if the offer of condemnation was not accepted, then I could pursue the condemnation, along with the special service area, realizing that the special service area process probably would be a little quicker than the court action. And alternatively, if the special service area, which requires 50% of the unit owners or property owners and 50% of the electors, or more than 50% actually, file an objection to the special service area, then that's done. So my plan then was to proceed in a process which the statutes provide for, which is a dual court action where you do the condemnation, and then the court also then imposes a special assessment.
What direction, Mr. Crumstock, does the council have to provide in order to start the process up once again, so that Brookwood knows what their options are and knows what the options are that we have and what we plan to do. Because like these gentlemen have said, we'd like to take some kind of action. We need to make sure that it's legal, and we need to make sure that it is in the benefit of all our residents. What direction does the council have to do?
I think from discussion tonight, obviously, City Attorney Jim McCall and I and Fred, we have some additional direction. We will have another round of letters and telephone calls go to Brookwood, but I think that we will start down that dual area again. We do have an appraisal. It is a little old, but not too old. But again, if we're going to start down the condemnation, it also, you'll hear me say this word later on in the discussion too, but it's one more tool to get their attention. And it might be the attention that the attorney who they have now in record will actually get them to work with us. And it would give us a little period of time. I don't want to give a timetable, but obviously, hopefully we'd be back at a timely manner with at least some kind of update if we got attention or if we're going through the condemnation itself. And then it would actually give us a little time on the public works side to get some estimates for the cleaning the creek, swell, whatever you want to call it at this point in time. And then we would actually need to get some authority to be on the property too, because our easements on the backyards, that's our thing. But at the same point in time, just making sure that we're on legal ground. As much as I like seeing Jim, sometimes I don't need him in my office.
Do you need for the mayor pro tem to take a straw poll to give you direction, or?
No, I think that we have enough of the discussion tonight. If you do a straw poll, I think it would commit to the overall arching, but I think that we've heard enough through individuals who are sitting here, but at the same point in time, if anybody else wants to say something, it would be to a point, but I don't think that a straw vote is really needed at this point in time because, again, we're in that mode that there's going to be some additional work that we're going to be doing.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
Thank you. Jim, I was wondering if you could answer maybe a question also. Is there any way that we can make this an emergency type of thing in light of the fact that a potential flood may or may not happen in spring? And I'm sure the people there are most concerned about that time of the year for the obvious reasons. So is there anything that we can do that can speed the legal process to make it more of an emergency type of request?
There is the ability, last time I looked, where I think the city can avail itself of, they call it kind of a quick take, and usually IDOT was the only ones that could do it, but they've amended that statute as I recall. So in any event, that could, if it's available to us, allow the city to expedite it. In effect, the way the process works is you got your appraisal and you tell them here's the appraised value, we'll deposit it with the court, you give us the money and we'll hash out the actual dollar amounts later. So
because IDOT is one of the controlling bodies in this, right? Don't they control the waterways? I thought IDOT who has the waterways for the state?
The state of Illinois, IDOT, or Department of Natural Resources, both work together with that, but this is not a identified waterway. It's why we refer to it as a open ditch storm sewer system.
So I understand that, but in light of the fact that the water eventually gets to a bigger body of water, doesn't that give them some jurisdiction? I mean, if we just dumped water somewhere, they sure get involved real quick then.
They do at Salt Creek because that is a identified waterway, but until our storm sewer system conveys it to either IDOT ditches, IDOT storm sewers, or to Salt Creek, no, they're not involved with us.
Okay. Well, I'll go along with the other people who've already spoken. The faster we do this, the happier I'll be. I'm sure the people over at Jody Court will be thrilled if we can do anything sooner than later. And, with Brookwood, I don't know. I'd like to be as harsh as I can with them as a group just because it seems like this has gone on for so long and we've tried to be reasonable, we've tried to reach out, and every time we basically get slapped down. And we always have excuses why they can't do something because they don't have enough. I don't know if they have too many leases there or whatever, but for one, I'm just tired of dealing with them. My attitude is whatever we can do to get this done as soon as possible is the most important thing. Thanks.
Alderman Majerkis.
Thank you. Earlier on, it was mentioned, community development's reached out to them about overgrown and all that stuff, right? So Brookwood just goes in and does the minimal and that's it? Is there a way that hit them in their pocketbook? We start
They've also
setting
been-
fines to the association, liens on the properties?
They do the minimum of whatever's written up. They've been in adjudication. There have been settlements with adjudication. So every little bit, and we don't know what has been referred to as a lot of absent owners, because you have owners who were there, and then the last time that we had the major flooding in Brookwood, a lot of the cars that were damaged were from renters. So we've tried getting some of them to speak to some of the owners and bring this up, but it's very difficult. And I know that when they go through their meetings and they send out their flyers, they are trying to get attention, but when it's an absent owner, it's very difficult to get some of the compliance. But we do send out, and we do appreciate when, after the meeting that we had that we just talked about, we did have some residents give us some tree locations and some other ideas, and community development did cite some of those, and those were cleaned up. But at the same point in time, we do have Brookwood in adjudication every so often because of trying to get them to comply.
And the maintenance is difficult because of the overgrowth, the canopy out there. Nothing grows at the bottom of that area, which further accelerates erosion and problems with the drainage system. And I know it's a kind of a double-edged sword in that the residents in Jody Court area, as well as those on Brookwood, have made it very clear to us that they like the privacy effect and like all of the vegetation, but yet that defeats and makes it much more difficult to maintain any type of a stormwater storage system there.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, Barry, my question is, when they're doing adjudication, now we do adjudication for homes that are not abandoned but defaulted on the loans, and we go after them, and then we can technically, and Jim, let me know if this is correct, put a lien on the house? Is there a way we can, if you can't stir anything quicker, say, okay, we're condemning it, and we're going to put a lien on the whole complex? I mean, I don't care if you're an absentee owner or not, if all of a sudden you have this property and you can't sell it. Is that a level, I mean, I'm with my counterparts here, what's the heaviest hammer that we can throw on them? I mean, if I get a notice that my property has a lien on it, unless I do something, I think it might stir them. Is there any?
Thank you. The statute that I'm having a recollection of reading about 3 or 4 years ago, I think did provide for the city, in this case, to be able to impose a lien upon Brookwood. But I'd have to check too, and how that easement would be affected. So I mean, I haven't gone back through that, so I need to do that.
Well, what I'm coming up with the consensus is we want to do something. So I'm looking at a 3-track here. Is let's look at what we can do to condemnation, the lien, to get their attention, and then what can we do with the creek threefold and go to it at all at one time. Anyone ever have thoughts or suggestions on that? Yes.
I think that you're right on all of that, other than we should have staff get back to us in a week or in 2 weeks with an update.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you, sir. Jim, do we have anything on our books, or is it feasible to put anything on our books to allow the residents of Jody Court to file legal action against Brookwood? Especially if their house floods or something like that, to go back and say, we this is what the city's done for this period of time. Brookwood would not ever acknowledge us, because this is not necessarily spring. It could happen now. I mean, you could easily get a huge storm come through, and especially now with all the leaves down, give these guys at least some kind of recourse and make sure Brookwood's aware of it, that, these guys can come to the association and sue you for damages to the property. Is there anything on our books, or is there anything we can put on our books to allow something such as that?
I don't know the answer to the question. I just, I simply don't know. I don't know how we could put something in our code of ordinances that would provide a private cause of action against one neighbor by the other neighbor. Man, I don't know that we couldn't do that.
Okay.
But whether there's a negligence action there, I don't know.
And I guess
that would be up to them to find out.
The other question I have is, well, two questions is, we have the ability to go mow grass at somebody's property. Why would we not have the ability to go do cleanup in this, based on the fact that it could cause damage and issues for other entities? I mean, we can force people to paint their houses. We can force people to do a variety of things. Mm-hmm. Can we not tailor any of those to this situation?
Mm-hmm. Well, then that gets back to the statute that I talked about before that I have to take a look at. But, yeah, we can look at expanding the provisions in the code to, require that, people with these detention areas maintain them.
But that's not going to happen any time in the near future, correct? We can do. I mean, it's not something we can do, quote unquote, that we've talked about immediately. Everybody says, we want to do something right away. I mean, that's still going to be
still an ordinance.
Couple-month process, or
reading, but I don't do the adjudications. There's another attorney in the office who does. But if they're already being taken to adjudication for failing to clean it out, it sounds to me like there's already something there.
Okay, and then
otherwise, I don't know how they get to adjudication.
The last question I have is, it seems kind of confusing to me how the whole system works, but if we use eminent domain or condemn this property, this portion of the property, and we pay them whatever the appraised price is, so let's just call it $150,000, it doesn't really matter. We're going to give them this $150,000, they're going to walk away, and yet they have no responsibility at that point in time.
Well, it's not that they don't have any responsibility. At that point in time, you're right. And that was part of the thinking between the city manager, public works director, myself, and the city engineer was, in these negotiations, we'll work in the fair market value for this easement. I want to say it was like $22,000 or $23,000, something like that. But in that way, we're not writing them a check and then trying to go through the whole special service area, and if that doesn't work, then the special assessments. So that's what we tried to do.
But it almost seems like they're rewarded to do nothing.
Well, I wouldn't say they're rewarded. I mean, what's coming is coming, and I guess the purpose for tonight is just to get direction from the council as to how you want us to do it.
And do we have any other recourse? I mean, if they say, fine, we'll take the condemnation, give us the $23,000, they're off the hook. All the expense falls on the city at that point in time, right?
Well, no, because you could still do the special service area. You can still do the special assessment.
But that impacts Jody Court tremendously, and really most of this problem, part of the reason we stepped away from the special assessment was the effects it's going to have on Jody Court, and we can't signal them out and say, okay, well, we're going to pay their portion, we're not going to pay Brookwood's portion, correct?
No,
in other words, the city can't say, we'll refund back to Jody Court their money to make them, net they don't lose anything, and just get the money from Brookwood. So let's say this whole thing costs $200,000, get $100 from Jody Court, but rebate them, get $100 from Brookwood, and keep the money. So we can't do that either, right?
Well, not directly. We not directly and not entirely. I mean, that was part of what we were trying to do, and we put the cost of the say the $22,000 figure that was the appraised value for that easement from Brookwood. We tried to put that into all the numbers. So Brookwood, on the one hand, Brookwood gets money, and on the other hand, Brookwood pays money. But it was all worked into whatever the time frame was going to be for the special assessment. It was just it was going to be part of a.
But again, it impacts Jody Court residents more than it does Brookwood.
No, actually, the participation is equal.
Right, that's what I mean, it's equal, so, but when you've got 10 houses on Jody Court and you've got 300 units or whatever it is in Brookwood, if you're splitting 300, 100 grand, it's 10 grand for each house, it's, nothing for 300 units.
That's true. But it's more than 10 houses. I don't remember the number of houses.
Well, I mean, I'm just,
Well,
I mean,
just
so is there
clear.
anything we can do, to make this painful for Brookwood versus where we're at? And if we can't, how fast can we do these things to get it so we can rectify the situation versus waiting any, whether, I mean, is there anything we can do in 2 months? Or is it something that we have to wait 6 months? Because if the end result's going to be X, I think the faster we can get to the end result, the better off we are for everybody.
No question about it.
So how do we get there?
Certainly, we could take a look at the code of ordinances that we talked about just a few moments ago, which, as I said, based on the fact that they're going to adjudication for not maintaining this, tells me there's something in the code. As far as, as far as the condemnation, 2 months is,
Not even close.
that's like lightning speed in my business, unfortunately. But probably 6, 8, I would think. If we could avail ourselves of that, kind of call it like a quick take type option. But for 22 grand, how much effort are they going to put in to defend it? I don't know. But you also have to, but you also have to take into account when you're talking about special service areas or special assessments, you look to the benefited area. So I don't know how you say, well, what we're calling the Jody Court property won't be benefited by this, and how Brookwood is 100% benefited by it.
I'm just thinking, just speed-wise, to at least get the thing cleaned out.
Absolutely.
And then we can do
ignoring
whatever
that.
we want.
Right, I'm not ignoring that. I mean, that's certainly the first thing we look at, or I would look at, is to see what we can do to get Fred's guys in there, or whoever's going to get in there, clean it out, and whether we could possibly put a lien on the Brookwood property.
Thank you.
Which would affect all the units, because it would be in the common area.
Hold on, Barry, before we go, I have a couple quick questions here. Fred, when that parking lot flooded, do we have an idea how much of the parking lot flooded? How much of that it became like a floodplain, which is a hazard?
That whole back area.
It's not,
I mean,
it wouldn't be deemed a floodplain, but my recall and understand the flooding has been more severe to their parking lot when we have what we call a high-intensity storm, 3 inches in an hour type of a thing. We've had 7 inches of rain over a 24-hour period not flood the parking lot. But the whole south exposure facing the detention area has flooded, and that's where our understanding is of the vehicles that have had damages. It's probably, based on the topography, more likely closer to frontage road than to the west of the property, but that's the area that's the exposure, is their parking stalls that face the detention area.
Are we estimating maybe 30, 40 parking spaces?
That's probably a good estimate. Yeah.
Okay, if that's the case, let's not just condemn the creek. That parking lot looks like it's a problem also. Let's condemn that property. If we can't get you with just hitting over the head, let's make the hammer a little bit bigger and see if we get your attention if we're going to take away 30 or 40 parking spaces that the city takes.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up, Alderman, because one of the studies that staff and the city engineer did was to look at if the detention area could be expanded to the north and move, in essence, the parking stalls. There's fairly wide aisles there. It certainly would be a much greater cost than what has been originally proposed, but could be of equal benefit if one wants to get that global with it. I would refer to it. It's, in my opinion, something to certainly look at a little bit more, but whether it's realistic and cost effective, would have to look at that more.
Thank you. Barry.
So just to go back to summarizing and not to cut off any discussion, but in a timely manner, I know where you said 2 weeks, but we might need a little bit longer, but legally, Jim's going to do some research and also send a letter to the Brookwood folks and start that parallel line. The other part is that Public Works will obviously be working with the engineering to do an eyeball because I don't know if we can get into that swale area. But we might be able to get in there, just life safety or anything else, to actually make an assessment with maybe a contractor or two or three to talk about some of those other pieces. But let us, as staff and with legal, start doing some of the pieces so we can get you some additional information at that point in time. This way, if we do get their attention, and we can keep on knocking on doors and sending the letters to the new attorney that we know about, and also making some reach out to the Bonnie to see
To the board?
Yes, to see if she'll respond to us too. Maybe we can also get the authority to go back in there. And what I would reiterate, one reason why we were talking about even taking in one of the proposals was part of that parking lot that you mentioned, but also about the creek, is then the creek or the swale or whatever you want to call it is really our responsibility at that point in time. And we feel that we would be a better steward of that property at this point in time, because no matter what we're going to do, that area has really got so much stuff in there. There's going to be a lot that's going to be pulled out of there. And then down the line, even if that was to be expanded, it will do some of the other pieces. But allow staff, and again, as we stated, and we've had a long discussion on this, and I don't want to cut it off, but allow us some time to do some of the digging and allow us to do some of the fact gathering, and then hopefully in 2 weeks, but it might be a staff report at the first November meeting, which would be November 8th. But let us get some information back to you on all the pieces, but also hopefully a nice tailored letter from the city attorney will get their attention with our telephone call too.
Alderman, yes.
Just thank you. Just real quick, not to drag this out, but their newest attorney, how new is he, and have we communicated with him, or is it going to be one of these, I've got to look into it, look at the backstory of this all?
He's been involved. He wasn't as involved as the old attorney was, so he does know some of the story on this.
But has it been since that March 2015 meeting that he's been involved?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He's involved. He's just
quiet,
less than active.
Okay. Thank you.
Alderman Beanbass?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, Barry. I have one question, and we've talked. I've heard from Burke, I've heard from Fred, I've heard from you, Barry, I've heard from our attorney. Can I have Valerie come up for a moment?
Sure.
So Valerie, I know you deal with all kinds of things in your department, and you've been somewhat silent on this issue. Is there anything we're missing here? I mean, we're ready to go forward here in a pretty dramatic way. Is there anything you can add to this discussion?
Not really. With our process, what we have to do is we rely on Brookwood to be responsive. We send them letters telling them that they have to clean things up. They are less than immediately responsive. It takes some threatening in some cases, but we don't go in to clean that up necessarily ourselves. We have to wait for them to be responsive.
So just out of curiosity, and you have, I'm sure, other complaints and issues go on. When you run into the situation where people are unresponsive, typically what's the next step you take?
We send them to adjudication, and what's unfortunate about that is that it's like a mini court.
Okay.
I'd say 30% of the time people don't show up, and probably another 20% of that time the improvements are not made. So it's a 50-50 chance.
And then if they don't show up to adjudication, then what do we do?
Fine them and lien the property.
Okay.
And we start the process all over
So have we done
again.
any of these things with Brookwood?
Oh, absolutely.
So we find
Yes.
them? Have we found them many times then?
They have actually eventually made the improvements, but as you well know, with vegetation, it keeps on growing back and becomes an ongoing problem.
Okay, so part of the problem with our system then is, even if you go after them for one instance and you fix the one instance, it just keeps recurring. So really, there's nothing in our tool belt here that can take care of an issue that reoccurs all the time through community development, right?
Not that I'm aware of, unless,
I'm just asking, I'm just curious, and I'll just let it go.
well, I mean, they become very judicious and and making these ongoing
Okay.
improvements.
So do you feel
or
like
going to circuit
Do you
court.
feel like we're going in the right direction?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
That's all I
Thank
got.
you.
Jump ball, she can skip stuff.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Just
Gary,
one quick
more
clarification for you. So let's say hypothetically, we have a repeat offender in adjudication, the fines increase. So the max fine of $750, but that's for each incident. So the adjudicator with the prosecutor look at the history, and they're always given a history of properties. They're given a history of the location and what the incidents are. So they would have that available to them each time.
So what is the maximum fine we've gone through with Brookwood so far?
That I'm not so sure on the top of my head.
Does Valerie know?
I don't think that we're going to.
No.
Can you find out, let us know, please?
Well, remember, they have made these improvements.
Yeah, I'm just curious
So-
what the fines are. If you could let us know.
Sure.
Thanks.
That's
all I have.
Thank you, Alderman Veenbos. As long as we're going to be looking at the codes and adjudication, if the fine is only $750, as I'm summing up what we've got, we're going to send a very strong letter to Brookwood. We're going to look at condemnation. We're going to look at the lien. We're going to look at something the creek, but also the code. You know, if it's only $750 and it's a repeat, well, let's make it $1,500 the next time, or $3,000 the next time. Is that something we can work with?
No, we're limited
By a
to
state
a dollar
statute.
amount.
That's all I have, unless, yes, Alderman Badger.
Thanks, and yeah, we can all tell we're at the end of this discussion. I don't want to be vindictive, and I do want to, I don't want to pretend that I think I can, sway the city and hit somebody over the head with our laws, our fines. I think that's a bad direction to go. It does disappoint me that we've been talking about this. I'm actually looking at a Daily Herald article from 7/24/2013. The headline, Rolling Meadows might condemn land for flood prevention. This is such a sense of deja vu. It's more complicated than this is just a waste of our time, but we have dealt with this for a long time. I would ask that staff keeps us apprised of the reaction, and I understand it's not going to be in 2 weeks, but I'd like, and I hope you other folks echo my sentiments, I'd like to be included in this so we can get some sense of how vindictive, how mad, or how big of a stick we should be wielding here. I don't want to be like that to residents. These are residents just like we are in our single-family homes. But we've been dealing with this for a long time. So let's move on this. Let's keep us in the loop after this discussion. I think Barry and Jim and the gang have direction, but yeah, it's time to start focusing on this. We've got so many other things to do as a city. This has been in front of us for 3 years. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Badger. Okay, Barry, I guess you're up next for...
Actually, I just have the intro for budget, and I'll give Finance Director Melissa Gallagher.
For your work and effort.
Bless you.
Bless you. Again, this is another committee of the whole meeting that we have of the budget that was presented back in August. Obviously, there are some other pieces that continue working throughout the budget, but again, it's another of your opportunities to discuss it. November 22nd is still the date that we are tentatively using, which we really do need to stay on track with for the overall approval of the budget. Again, when you look at the budget, it does have some other new pieces that we've taken into account since the last meeting. The overall property tax levy was adjusted. It's at 4.8. The reduction in police protection and fire protection were reduced, but the police and fire pensions are at the full max of the number that we talked about. Again, it's a 4.8% increase, and with some of those other items, it is in play with what we talk about. So overall, we do have a list of other items that we just want to talk about during the PowerPoint, and overall, Finance Director Melissa Gallagher will take you through it. The last meeting, we were also asked about business license, liquor license, some of the other pieces, and we'll go through some of those pieces too. So with that, I turn it over. And the clicker should be working.
Thank you, Mr. Crumstock.
Thank you, Melissa. It's always a pleasure.
And we'll begin. We're going to just go through a short PowerPoint presentation just as a budget recap, and we will then go to the council packet and review that. So to begin with, the budget calendar and process, really the budget process begins as soon as we close out one budget, we begin a new one. So in January of each year, however, it does culminate into the presentation, which we deliver to the City Council, and we did that August 23rd. We have held one-on-one meetings with the City Manager, Finance Director, and City Council members. We had the public hearing for the city's tax levy and the library's tax levy, which took place September 27th. We had the public hearing for the city's budget and the library's budget, which took place October 11th. There have been some first readings and second readings accomplished so far. And so with that being said, we have tonight's committee of the whole meeting for continued budget discussion. We have the October 25th meeting coming up for City Council to review some ordinances and first reading of other ordinances. Then we also have November 8th City Council meeting and November 15th Committee of the Whole meeting. As Mr. Crumstock mentioned, we are scheduled to wrap up the budget November 22nd with the final approval or adoption of the budget and acceptance of the library's budget. And of course, as a reminder that we have deadlines with Cook County to file the tax levy. This is always an important snapshot, and we do like to include this. We do include this in our adopted budget when we get to that point in our proposed budget. But really, when you look at every single dollar for property taxes, 15 cents out of every single property tax dollar is Rolling Meadows' share. So when you think about that, we offer a lot for our dollars. The largest portion of the property tax bill is related to the school system. Outstanding debt service. This is a chart that we like to include to make sure that we're keeping an eye on the ball on the long-term progress for the city of Rolling Meadows. We have several bonds that will be maturing in 2017. We have 2 outstanding bonds that are still on the property tax levy for the 17-year and 2018 year. Our largest bond going out to 2023, which matures in that year, is paid from the general fund, and that is through general fund revenues. As Mr. Crumstock mentioned, for the property tax levy for the proposed budget so far, updated at the September 20th Committee of the Whole meeting, there were some changes by City Council, which we've updated in these pages for your review. The police and fire protection line items, now that's not pensions, remember that's just for public safety that goes into the general fund. Those were reduced by $181,069 for a total of for each line item for a total of $362,138. That reduced the tax levy down to 4.8% year-over-year change at $612,597 is a total increase. On the next slide, you'll see that the general fund, the only change that has been accomplished this so far is that change from the tax levy by reducing the tax revenue for police and fire protection line items. The general fund revenues for taxes were reduced, but then also we took out the expense for reserves because now that is fully funding from the property tax levy, and it's important just to look at that. So overall, there's been no net change in the percentage of fund balance to expenditures so far in the budget process. This is an important slide here. This shows the general fund analysis in terms of 2017 proposed budget expenditures are $32.4 million all in for this year. Fund balance estimated at $7.5 million for the general fund. And then the fund balance as a percentage or ratio to expenditures is 23.2%, which is just under 3 months of expenditures, which when you think of it is 3 months of reserves for the city in the general fund. And there's a breakdown with the other months of expenditures. This slide will show you the local government distributive revenues from the state of Illinois. We've shown this before, but it's an important part of our general fund. We have 3 major revenues that are attributed to local government distributive revenues, which are the income tax, local use tax, and PPRT. The other one is motor fuel tax, and that is just distributed into the motor fuel tax fund. It's important to note that there are some incremental changes, and this is not something that we control in terms of increases. This is all attributed to the economy. Here's a snapshot of the fund balance summary for the 2017 proposed budget. It does show you all of the estimated fund balance beginning for the year of 2017, all-in revenues and expenditures. There is a manager's hold for the general fund for the ongoing labor negotiations and the estimated fund balance. So we like to show this as a snapshot. It is included in the budget, and this is a useful way to look in the all-in pie for the city's budget. So far, as a budget recap, utility rates, we have passed ordinances so far. There have been 3 for the water, sewer, and stormwater. Those were approved at October 11th City Council meeting. And now I'm going to just turn back to the actual packet, and I'll leave the PowerPoint on this slide here. So while this is just a short recap, we did come back with several items based on the discussion at the City Committee of the Whole meeting in September. The first item that we wanted to review with you, and we could go through them and then you can go back for discussion. The first one was building permits. Building permits, and all of these, really the ones we're talking now, are related to the general fund. So building permits is a revenue source that is in the general fund. The request is to possibly review some sort of incremental increase to building permits as an amount to be determined. So as a reminder, for the 2016 budget, the City Council did approve a 3% across-the-board increase for building permits. And the last increase prior to that was a 2012 increase. So when we went back and reviewed our research, right now the city's in a median for building permits across municipal comparables. So what we're looking at right now is what sort of increase are we looking at now, or perhaps build it into future budgets. And I can leave it here at this point, or we could go through each item. It's entirely up to the City Council's desire how to run through the discussion items.
Mr. Cannon?
Thank you. I'm one of the people who proposed this, so I guess I would propose a 2% increase across the board if we could on these items, just to keep up with inflation. No other reason other than that. I think keeping them the same, like I stated when I originally brought this up, I think by leaving them exactly where they're at, we do a disservice for ourselves in a way, because everything we buy or pay for in the city, whether it's employee salaries or things we buy, everything goes up a little bit every year. So I would just say an incremental increase would be fine. I'm also for still an increase in city vehicle stickers. Everybody in our city benefits from having better streets. Stickers are, I think, one of the major reasons, major sources of funding. I would ask that we would look at that closely. I guess we could talk about that separately if we want. But do you want to do that now or later? I'm not.
Like I said, it's entirely up to the City Council. I've got that item at the bottom of the packet.
I don't want to jump in.
Stick with the where we're at right now with the building lot, and then.
So my desire would be a 2% increase across the board in those items, just to keep up with inflation. That's an opinion.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments? Alderman Banjo.
Thank you. I think the danger with a lot of these permit fees is when you start doing 2% increases, the numbers are goofy. It's a 30-cent increase. I would much rather sit on it for a number of years. I'm not talking many years, but 2 or 3 years, and then just like we do with rental dwelling below, it turned out to be $5 at a time. $5 increase isn't sticker shock, and I see where Mr. Cannon's coming from, because if we sit on these for a decade, all of a sudden they double, because we have to true them up and reflect the fact that, as he said, things don't cost the same each year. But what I'd like to do, and this is completely up to our finance director and city manager, is at their discretion, and I think they have done this for a few of these. Hey guys, this is the year that we want to catch up with other municipalities in our peer group and increase them by $5, $10. I think that makes more sense with the actual dollar amount we're increasing, and it doesn't necessarily make our city staff work on these with a change every year, because the change with vehicle stickers does entail a lot of work, and just getting that into the hands of the folks who print up the schedule of fees, and then just getting all the residents on board. If we do that every year, I just think that's asking for trouble and a lot more work. I'd much rather let staff figure out, dial it in every, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 years, and have significant but not eye-popping type increases. Thank you.
So having arrived from parent-teacher conferences, I'd like to thank Alderman Prana for not only taking the chair for the temporary amount of time that it took me to get here, but also I see that you followed the proper dress code for this evening. Yes, I may be shorter and not quite as gray on top, but otherwise on camera it probably looks the same.
And they are Cub colors.
And they are Cub colors, and that was intentional. Yes, sir. So further comments on item 4.
We're in 4A.
4A, okay, sorry.
Building permits.
Oh, I see. So under the umbrella of, but specifically talking about the, okay, fair enough, thank you. Further comments or questions for the staff? Seeing no further comments or questions from the staff on this particular item, I would just echo Mr. Banger's sentiments. I certainly appreciate the concept that people don't want to get whacked all at one time, but sometimes other types of taxing bodies are criticized, I believe correctly, for the mentality that says, hey, let's go up to a 5% raise, because anytime we don't do that, that's lost money, and so forth and so on. I think there's a fine balance that people have to maintain between just increasing because you can, and I'm sure it does help future increases be smaller. So I believe Alderman Banger described a fairly nice midpoint of, okay, you don't have to let the increases get massive, but you also don't have to fiddle every year. And so I would just second the comments that he made. Anything else on that particular part of the agenda? So then, is this 4B, I'm guessing?
Yes, the 4B would, and then what staff will take at this point in time is that we're just...
4A, 4B, what are you talking about?
Mr. Cromstock, you were saying?
That we would just stay status quo at this point in time for building permits unless there's more discussion at a later date. But at this point in time for 4A building permits, we would stay with status quo. And then we would go to 4B, which is the rental dwelling license discussion.
Okay, so then is anybody else looking to weigh in on the idea of the staff staying with where they are at the moment for the permit fees and such, and then we'll move to the next topic? Mr. Diaz.
I think for economic development, I think we need to, if we're already at the midpoint, I'd say we stay where we are and we do not increase permit fees.
Further thoughts? That is the direction that staff will be taking unless the direction of the discussion takes a different turn. Then seeing no further discussion among the staff, among the council, I believe the staff can take that as direction to hold them steady for the moment. So the rental dwelling licenses?
Yes.
Ms. Gallagher.
So I'll continue the rental dwelling licenses. We did do an incremental phase-in increase from 2016 and also for 2017. So those were increased last year and for this coming budget as well, with income coming in about $90,000 plus, depending on the types of rental and dwelling licenses. So what we're looking for is direction whether or not to further the increase, considering the fact that we did do increases for 16 and 17. Just bringing it back for discussion.
And that is where the staff is putting it at the moment. Are there discussions of any changes? Seeing none, then I believe the staff, Mr. Diaz.
I just ask, how do our numbers compare in the marketplace? Are we higher, lower, the same?
Valid question. Ms. Gallagher?
So we went back to that research, and last year, with these increases, we're slightly above the median.
Okay.
We're still at that placeholder.
Mr. Diastis, is that a sufficient answer?
Yes.
Further discussion? Then not seeing any further discussion, the chair will assume that the direction for the staff is to go as proposed by them. Is there any objection to doing so? Then staff may take that as tacit agreement from the council. Let's go to C, the business licenses.
For business licenses, for the 2016 budget process, we did review a process to look at a 5% potential increase, generating roughly about $20,000 to $40,000 is an estimate. Now, a couple caveats to that. We haven't been requested to look at another increase in terms of a dollar amount, but that's just what we're using from last year's figure. This period of time, of course, our business licenses are generated actually right now, and they're going to be mailed out in about 2 weeks. So this really wouldn't take place for the 2017 year. This would be something that maybe in a future budget year we want to bring back. But for the 2017 year, it would have no impact. So something to think about if you, as the City Council, would like us to consider this as a going forward item that we need to review. But at this point, for 17, it would not have an impact. And I just wanted to make sure I footnoted that.
Mr. Cannon.
I guess the question I would ask is, could we give direction to do it for next year at this point? Because, I mean, next year we'll be at the same position again. You're getting ready to send them out, and we haven't made a decision one way or another, or we just left them where they're at. So could we pass a rule right now saying
yes,
for next budget year they would increase?
Yes, sir.
If we can,
certainly a possibility.
If we can, that's what I would recommend we do.
Okay. Mr. Judd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be in favor of that. Just, 2012, and now we're already talking 2018, so it's a 6-year deal. Again, our costs continue to go up. I don't see an issue with increasing them for that because it's been 6 years. So I'd support it.
Mr. Diastis.
Without facts or figures, I would not support it. I believe that we need to be very pro-business, and I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know how much of a percentage. I don't know how much the licenses are. I'd like to see more information. I just wouldn't blindly say I support this. In fact, at this point in time, I would say I do not support raising business licenses for next year. It seems like we've got, I'd say 6 or 8 months to look this over and get some information before we have to make a decision. So at this point in time, tonight, I'd say no. I'd like to see more information before, so I can make an educated decision.
Further discussion on business licenses. Mr. Prane.
I would agree that at this point, until we had more information, I would not support raising the business licenses this year. I mean, if we get more information, we can always bring it forth throughout the year, correct?
That is correct, up to the certain point in the 2018 budget discussions where it might reach that point. So
we have we have 6-7 month window after this to look at it. Correct?
Then might the chair suggest perhaps instead of a straw poll on whether to do it for 2018 or not, I think we might all be able to get together on a straw poll that would say this should be a specific committee of the whole item. Whenever the staff feels it's appropriate that we can comfortably meet the deadline that Mr. Cannon was referring to. My suggestion is January, February-ish, but it's just a suggestion, and I don't think we need to pick the month tonight. I think that's getting a little too deep into the weeds. But perhaps since the objections may not be about the increase itself, but simply needing more information, perhaps actual direction to put this in the committee of the whole queue that Mr. Crumpstock keeps might be an appropriate action. Is there any discussion on doing that? Mr. Judd.
I would be comfortable with that as long as we pick a drop dead date, whether it's April 1st, May 1st, as long as it's done so we don't lose it somewhere in the process. I don't care what month it is, but as long as we have a drop dead date.
Fair enough. Then I might just alter that suggestion slightly by saying direction from the council will be sometime in the first quarter of 2017. Is that satisfactory? Then may I ask unanimous consent? Is there any objection to asking the staff to wherever comfortable in the first quarter of 2017, actually present the facts and figures that are being requested on this particular item about raising business licenses for 2018. Is there any objection to doing so? Then seeing no objection, the staff can take that as direction.
Thank you.
Then that'll bring us to D, which is the liquor licenses.
Yes, so this is a line item within the general fund. Last year also, there was a request to review a possible increase anywhere from 3 to 5%. There are approximately 36 liquor licenses in the city of Rolling Meadows and different fees for different licenses. The approximate revenue is about $140,000 to $150,000 in the general fund annually. So with an approximate increase of 3 to 5%, it could generate another $4,000 to $7,000. So again, this is something that's brought back to the City Council. City Council decided last year not to pursue such an increase. We're bringing it back just as another incremental increase per the request at the September Committee of the Whole meeting.
Then on this particular item, I would start by offering the thoughts that I hope the council won't decide to pursue any changes right now. There was a bit of a survey of local municipalities being done. With many things, we're at the median, a little above the median, whatever. For this one, Rolling Meadows was quite high up the list. And so I personally, knowing that we're high on the list as opposed to near the median where a lot of people are comfortable, don't see any need. I do understand, as we discussed earlier, that sometimes these kinds of increases are necessary, but we're already high. So I see no need to make any further changes. Ms. Majakis.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with you. I have no desire to increase this, especially looking at it's only going to be a $4,000 to $7,000 difference. I don't think it's, compared to some of the bills, the street costs and things, I don't think that's going to do much. So I have no desire to increase this.
Further discussion on item D? Mr. Diaz.
I'm in agreement as well. I think we need to show our businesses that we proactively support them, and as high as we are on some of these things, I would not support this.
Mr. Prana.
I wouldn't support it either. And we're talking about doing a cow meeting on the previous. Maybe we can throw this as in there, because maybe we need to readjust what we have for licenses. If we're that high on the spectrum, make us a little more competitive. Look at it in a cow meeting of maybe we need to adjust them downward, possibly.
It's certainly a reasonable request. If we've done that with item C, we could do the same for item D if there's a sufficient level of interest.
And just do it in, again, first quarter.
At the same time, of course. Right. Of course. Is there any thoughts on, let's put it this way, is there sufficient interest to add liquor licenses to the business license discussion that we've already put forward? I'm not really sure how to interpret the silence. I think by default, I could say there's not enough support to make that part of the discussion, but I also want to be fair to the suggestion. Does anybody mind a mini straw poll here on this item?
Sure.
Then may I ask how many people have sufficient interest to add liquor licenses to the business license discussion we just gave staff direction for? Please raise your hand. How many people say not interested enough? A majority of the council does not have sufficient interest. Then I believe we can go to item E, which is the local road funding summary. This is something that we've been talking about quite a bit. A number of different committee of the whole items have all been, I believe we're up to part 4, I think was what last month was. So there has been quite a bit of discussion already, but I believe staff is telling us now it's go time for whatever type of instruction we would need to give. So Ms. Gallagher.
Well, more than anything, this is really a recap of the local road summary. And also, this just kind of highlights the things that have taken place over the last year or so. The Ad Hoc Capital Improvements Committee, and I really want to say a big thank you to their time and their energy in reviewing projects and taking the time to really dig in and understand how the whole picture works. And Well, their time and effort has yielded some great results. So one of the things that happened was just bringing forward some of the ideas of looking at other ways to potentially manage the road fund. So with that, the City Council in the last year approved a 1 cent increase in the motor fuel tax. And remember, that's the local road motor fuel tax. It's not the state, with ordinance number 1549. So that yielded an additional amount to the roads. That's one thing that City Council accomplished over the last year. The next was that the budget for 2016 included a line item specifically for roads. The 2016 budget also had a transfer of $350,000 from the general fund over to the road fund. And then also the City Council approved with a recent resolution to amend the 2016 budget and bring additional funds of $500,000 to the roads. So a lot of commitment over the last year to the roads. At this point in time, these are the items that we're looking at as a review. Now going forward, I know that the City Council asked us to bring back other ideas. We've gone, as the mayor has mentioned, about 4 sessions into sort of looking at what else we can do, and we're going to continually to do that going forward. The request was to see about vehicle stickers, whether or not they can be increased incrementally, something that can be done, of course, over time. At this point in time, staff is recommending to maybe chart the course at this time in terms of the $30 increase. The $30 price for vehicle stickers is right now the passenger rate. We sell about 15,000 passenger rate vehicle stickers. The rest are reduced fees for seniors, military or free, disabled, and other types of stickers. The net revenue to the fund is about $500,000 all in for all the types of passenger and other types of codes. So what we're saying here is at $30, we're at where pretty much all municipal comparables are at this point in time. And we're not really at the high mark, we're not at the low mark. But when you're looking at all across the board, everyone's around $30 for a passenger vehicle. We do have some discounted ones. So of course, incremental change can happen over time. It's just if the City Council wants to pursue any additional changes for vehicle stickers.
So then my reading of this says that the staff is not currently proposing at this time any changes of their own volition. They're asking the council if there are any changes that people want to pursue in this area for the final budget discussions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then does the council have any final suggested changes? Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Melissa, can you remind me what year we actually last increased the passenger one, the $30 one?
We went, let's see, I'm trying to think back now. I believe it was 2012.
Okay.
Or 2013.
So
and then we also did a consolidation.
Yeah, 2015 was the big consolidation.
Right.
But that didn't affect passenger cars.
But we did increase several, so they did go up.
I understand. I'm just asking about
and then we did some combining.
Right.
So there were some changes to folks that were paying much lower, and then they were paying much higher. So for instance, like trailers went up from $8 to $30. There aren't a lot in the trailer category. But for the most part, the last increase was about 2012, 2013 for the passenger rate.
So at this point in time, we're looking at least 3 years, maybe 4 years since we last increased.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess I'm still proposing we do. No one wants to raise rates, but I mean, somehow we have to figure out a way to fund our streets for a long-term thing. And we can't keep on making the statement in this room that, oh, it's only $30,000 or it's only $15,000. And that's a lot of money. And it's $15,000 or $30,000 every year going forward. It's not just 1 year. So I mean, if we did a $2 increase in them, which I know no one wants to do, you know, at the end of 2 years or 3 years, we got enough to do another whole street that could be included in the program. Everybody at this table knows we're way, way underfunded on roads. And I know we've done a good job getting it together this year by kind of switching some money around, but we're not going to be able to do that every year. And all I'm just looking for a way to try to help this going forward. Again, I know no one wants to increase them, but we got to do something to keep this going. We got to get the money from somewhere. I guess the other sub-story I would say is, you know, we probably have a small number of vehicles in town that are electric vehicles that don't buy any gas. Maybe we should consider having a little higher fee for them, $5 more a year or something, because they don't buy any gas. So those are my thoughts. Maybe people don't agree with me, but that's where I'm at.
Further thoughts on the item of does the council want to make any changes to the local road funding pattern that we've established? Mr. Judd.
I think just based on what we have up there, that, we started with $1.5 million and we're going to end with $31,000. I think it's got validity behind it, because if we want to do another 1.8 next year, we're overspending 1.5 million. If we do that, we've got a negative 1.5 if all things being equal. Granted, $15,000 or $30,000 isn't going to make that big of a difference, but to what Alderman Cannon's saying, over the course of 3 years, it's X amount of dollars. So, I think it's something that has validity and something we should seriously consider. So, thank you.
Further thoughts around the table? Mr. Diastis.
Thank you. As a member of the Ad hoc Capital Improvements Committee, we did recommend that the city spend more on roads. I think that for fiscal year 2017, we were able to achieve the desired results. And granted, we could always use more, but I would not support raising fees on city stickers. I just don't like incremental raises. People say they use that like it's nothing. There's a lot of people in town who $2 and $5 and $6 means a lot to them. And I would not support that. Not this year. Now, if next year we need to find $30,000 worth of money to help improve our streets, then that's a different issue. But this year, I don't think we need to do it, and I would not support a raise in the city sticker this year, especially knowing that we're in the medium. I'm sorry, too many people have not totally recovered from the recession or the downturn or whatever you want to call it. I am not in favor of it this year. We don't need it for this year. If we need it for next year, I think people will say, yes, we need it. We want to fix our roads. They can swallow it next year. This year, I don't want to do it. Thank you.
Mr. Banger.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of user taxes, which is what this is. The people who are paying for vehicle stickers obviously are using the roads, but it's imperfect in that we have tons of commuters rolling Meadows from other towns, visitors. I know that sounds awful, and you can't slice and dice that. You'd have to set up toll roads to get the true money for the roads from the people who are using them. And I guess just I'm in the same boat as Alderman Diastis is. This is a great idea. I understand the sense of urgency from Alderman Cannon, and it's got to come from somewhere. It's got to start sometime, but I'm just not interested this year. Thanks.
Further thoughts on the possibility of moving vehicle stickers off the $30 charge for passenger vehicles? Mr. Veenbos.
I'm in agreement. I believe there's a time, but it's not now.
Then may I ask if we could take a straw poll by phrasing it first, how many people are in favor of moving off $30 and how many people are in favor of keeping it $30? And that way, only if there's sufficient interest in moving off, do we then need to talk about whether it's $2 or $2.50 or $3 or whatever? Is there any objection to taking the straw poll in two stages like that? Then may I ask how many people are in favor of making a change to the $30 charge for passenger vehicles on the vehicle stickers? That's two. How many people are opposed? That is a majority of the council. So then we move to item F, and I would like to preface item F, which is simply saying, are there any other items for discussion on the budget at all? If somebody has an idea that comes up after tonight, that's certainly still fine, and what I'm about to say doesn't preclude that from happening. But up until tonight, we've talked about how early signaling of intentions is always appreciated. We're kind of nearing that point now where you go too much past tonight, and it's kind of like, hey, why didn't we start talking about this earlier? So tonight is not a deadline in any way, shape, or form, but instead of simply inviting early signaling, I think starting with tonight, it starts to take on a little bit different tone of, okay, this is really coming now, and nobody likes surprises. I was about to say nobody likes a November surprise, but seeing as how there's an election coming soon, we probably shouldn't use expressions like that. So I would encourage everyone who might have something that they want to throw out, even if you're thinking about it, pretty much after tonight, you're putting the other members of the council in a bind. So I would encourage any final thoughts that people have on adjustments to the budget to at least be thrown out as a thought this evening so that everybody has adequate time to think and prepare. So with that as the preface, are there other items for discussion, as it says in our printed material? The chair sees no other items for discussion. Therefore, staff, would you consider item 4 in all its parts to be sufficient direction that you were asking for as a part of this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Then I believe Mr. Crumpstock is getting ready to change PowerPoints. So I can help a little bit with the soft shoe to make this happen because Next Level Northwest, the Regional Business Collaborative, has been pitched by the communities that you see in the packet, and one of our local city managers and a person who's kind of a spokesperson for this group did come in to talk to Mr. Crumpstock and I, or in me, I guess I should say, and they did that with all the towns. They went to try to see the manager and the mayor and just say, this is our idea, this is what we're bringing forward. Elk Grove Village really gets kind of primary recognition for authorship of this idea. But as you can see, it doesn't just include Elk Grove Village. There are already a number of other communities that have signed on. There have only been 2 that have said, thanks, but we're not interested. And this item is going to be asking the council, what do you think? Should we be part of this group? As you will see, a lot of people throw around business terms like they're synonyms for each other. And so oftentimes when you say something like an incubator, when you say something like an accelerator, when you say different terms, people think, oh, they're all talking about the same thing. In this particular case, it's not. This is not really starting an idea from the ground up. It's kind of taking an idea that's all, or taking a number of little ideas that are all at step 1 and trying to collectively bring them into a step 2. That's the general pitch. And as you'll hear as part of the PowerPoint, there is a cost attached. All the member communities are asked to put forward the seed money of $15,000 per community for a period of 3 years. And then there's an additional $5,000 to be done by the end of the year if we're interested. So on the one hand, it's a $50,000 commitment. On the other hand, it's spread out over 3 years and is being joined in by at least 7 other communities. And that kind of leverage is something they're counting on. So what do you think, Mr. Crumpstock? Did we give you enough time?
No, I think I'm ready.
All right. So if I can direct your attention to the PowerPoint screen, Mr. Crumpstock.
And the PowerPoint is actually in the agenda. We're one of the last communities that Mayor has actually mentioned to go through this presentation. There's already been a Daily Herald article on this. So the communities that have actually been talking since the beginning of 2016 are obviously us, the city of Rolling Meadows, Arlington Heights, Buffalo Grove, Elk Grove Village, Hanover Park, Hoffman Estates, Mount Prospect, and Schaumburg. So it gives you that nice corridor look of everybody who's really been looking at this. So why are we really looking at this? We're looking really to make a vibrant area for the whole corridor. A collaborative is obviously different from an incubator. An incubator really starts businesses. What we're really focusing on with this collaboration are really stage 2 businesses. And those are smaller businesses, less than 100 employees, and they're typically operating for several years and can employ anything from 10 to that 100 employees. So when you look at some of the ideas that have been going out there right now, originally economic development, according to the Brookwood Institute, was incentive-based corporate recruitment. So you're giving away things. Some people would say, oh, what can you get for this? Or what money are you giving away in a TIF or something like that. What has actually happened now with governments is we're looking for what other items are in our toolbox to generate and to nurture growth. And This is what we look for in this cooperative. It's supporting entrepreneurs, it's investing in infrastructure, it's really helping the corridor overall. Why is this so important? When you look at the state of Illinois, and I'm not trying to say anything that's out there for anybody out there, but the state of Illinois has certain issues. Our neighboring states, specifically Indiana and Wisconsin, are really taking a lot of businesses away. We are not really recovering as well as other states, and when you look at it, this really does hurt. And you do hear ads in the radio now that says, people moving out for one reason or another, property taxes. But again, we're losing our competitive edge. To make that competitive edge actually more interesting, you got the city of Chicago that has, I don't want to use that word too many times, but they do poach some of the businesses from the suburbs and bring them into the city of Chicago. We're trying to keep our suburbs and our corridor viable and healthy. So when you look at the population, it's really an outbound that you see. So again, it becomes a concern with everything that we talk about. The situation, it really depends in Cook County and also throughout the state, but we really want to be that first group that's out there. And as we told with the Economic Development Committee, this is a great tool for us. It's a new tool. Fox Valley has kind of a this kind of incubator slash accelerator, but ours is going to be specifically a cooperative as the accelerator. But the state tax burden and negative population growth has really hurt most of the communities and businesses in the area. But we need to stay proactive, and we believe, as this cooperative has been working with, and there's still work that needs to be done. Obviously, we have not finished an IGA, and that needs to be done, and we're still doing some work, but we're ready to bring this back to everything else. So the government investment, and again, with some of these other items and other discussions that have been out there, it's really shown the cooperative is the root of innovation. When you look at some of the other documents that are out there, if you can spur some of these mom and pops, they can grow. They can go to that next community. They can continue that position of growth, but they can continue with their overall piece. And you look at some of these other stage 2, this is what we're talking about. Again, stage 1, everybody sort of knows who those are. Stage 2 is really where we're focusing. And again, smaller businesses that are ready to grow between that 4 and 100 employees. But again, they're small enough that hopefully with some of the development, they will grow. It's kind of interesting too, because when you look at the corridor of the 8 communities that we've talked about, you have a population, I'm rounding, about 400,000, and then we have potential business base of 20,000 businesses. Some of them healthy, some of them just need some help. The mission of the Northwest, Next Level Northwest, and that was also about 2 meetings just trying to figure out a name, but that's a different story. It really helps those second stage businesses and is a value added dealing with wisdom and continuous learning. It tries making those managers, those business owners get some of the expertise and some of the knowledge that we have and other groups have, and might give them some facilitation, but they have to be open for some of that too. So it's a two-way point. They just can't listen to the trainer and say, okay, I don't believe that, I'm doing it my way. So it's business growth, but it's sustainable. The strategic leadership that we talk about is really the municipalities. So right now, just the managers are part of it, but we've actually talked to some other groups, but the core functions of running a healthy business are obviously planning, management, oversight, audit, financial. Some of those things really need to be put in there. But the governance of this new group of, again, Next Level Northwest, the collaborative, it would have a board of directors. It would have an executive committee. It would have all these different features that we're still working on. Again, as I keep on reiterating, and we always talk about, it's a toolbox. It supports wisdom, continuous learning, all those things that we talk about, but it would also help overall some of the other healthy environments that we have in the municipalities. And it also would make sure that the corridor is healthy. The other thing is that the accelerator would deliver on those plans. And that's what we're still working on, because you do want a return on your investment. Obviously, it does take the seed money in for 3 years. That's where the municipalities are. But then again, after that, between grants and some of the other groups participating, we hope that it's really self-sufficient. They would be setting up as a 501c3. So again, it has a lot of different pieces. The biggest thing is that the coaches that each of the businesses would be having are taking them through all these different things. They want to make sure that they succeed and they grow and they develop. The execution is, again, as we've always talked about, there's phase 1, there's phase 2, there's the core that we talk about with some of the other pieces. But again, each of the pieces that the managers continue talking about, it needs to be developed and also executed. The big thing about it is that after phase 2 and phase 3 keep on going on, it allows the people to grow and develop. It's, again, support, core, all those kind of things that make a healthy environment. And again, we're not looking at the small entrepreneur. We're looking really for that business that's already in place, 4 to 100 employees. And I think that an example of that is we recently have a new business, a lawn care, a very small company, but it's really very small based. And if you remember from economic development and also from the council meeting, he came back to Rolling Meadows because he's grown, but it might be time for him also to branch out at a later date to grow, develop, and also move to other locations too, but keeping his Rolling Meadows home located as the thing. Obviously, as I mentioned, we've been talking as managers since 2016. There's work in 2017, 2018 that needs to really be developed. So again, it does have its own pieces that we're still working on. There's obviously some recruiting of some coaches that we would need to do. There's obviously ROIs that need to be adjusted, and then some reports that we talk about. But the critical factors that we talk about is really it would increase revenues for those businesses and increase jobs. And again, hopefully throughout the corridor, but also for that main business. It would allow growth and develop, and you keep that competitive edge. We talk about the corridor overall. You look at some of the businesses that we have, it's very, very interesting to see some of the mom and pa's, and they might be ready just for those extra coaches to take it to that next level. And that's what the accelerator actually does. And the biggest thing for the community is no matter where this accelerator is in actually helping these things, and this goes back to Fox Valley, where some of the other pieces have been in place, but the community growth has helped. People moving into their thing. It's been attractive for new businesses because they see that tool that they can get to at a later date. And then it strengthens the tax base overall. So again, the community investment that we mentioned, there is a startup, there is some other pieces. They have to make pitches to this board. And then after that, there's some funding to the company in each of the communities. We talk about $5,000 to $6,000 for the initial, and then for 3 years, it's $15,000. So again, you are looking at a commitment, but that's really the seed money that we actually talk about. Return on investment, we really do think of that overall. These numbers are some of the numbers that utilizing the resources of an individual, Dr. Ray Benetano, who's really looked at some of the other pieces that we've looked at, the region, the community, and also using Fox Valley as some of their thing. And again, not to belabor anything, but it's really a tool that we think, and we do think it would be great for the stakeholders. Overall, I know I went really quickly, but again, the Economic Development Committee did recommend it for the ones who were there, and unanimous approval. We thought it was great. And again, it's approximately $50,000. We do see it as a small amount, but again, it's a partnership that we believe the corridor would really feel good about, but also at the same point in time, it's something that's still being developed. There's still some other pieces that would be before you guys. And again, the IGA, we're still working on the governmental side, but we just needed to start bringing this out to everybody else and also getting approval at this point in time.
So Alderman Majakis and Alderman Diastis, as members of the Economic Development Committee, would you care first comments? Alderman Majakis.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this was received very positively by EDC. I think it's a great program, and I think the small businesses that they're targeting, as Mr. Comstock noted, employee-wise size and everything, will just give them that something extra to help grow their business, and I think also to see that the city cares and is offering programs like these in the neighboring communities, and that we're all working together, and that can only reflect positively on us and how we want to support businesses now, and then even in the future when others have been established a little bit and want to come into this program also. So it did get a very positive response from EDC, and I am in full support of this. Thank you.
Alderman Diastis.
Economic development is the key to our future, and this is just another tool in our belt. So I would echo Alderman Majakis, and I support this 100%.
Further discussion of this item by members of the council. Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In some ways, it sounds like a great program. I guess I have some concerns. I guess the first concern I would have is being a little bit selfish. Who from our city would be on, whose head would be on the board here? Who's going to have to do all the work to have our participation move forward?
Until we're actually up and running, until those IGA and everything else right now, it's really been staying with the managers and some of the Economic Development Committee members. So at this point in time, it would stay with staff, but at a later time, we would ask, obviously, be rolled out of either some other staff member or it would be someone outside. There's actually one community that they're actually potentially going to be tapping a business leader who is very active in their area, and they felt that he might be very good for that kind of sitting on the board and doing some of the vetting and that point. But in a back way, no matter what the municipality is, would be getting some of the additional information. It's just sitting on that board and doing some of the vetting and sitting with some of the coaches that at some point it would not be me.
So you're only looking at this for a few months. Would you be involved?
I'm really hoping that in 2017 it's a handoff, because you see my desk.
I know. That's what one of my concerns, I guess. I guess the other thing I was wondering, just for a point of clarification, is there going to be paid staff with this group?
Right now, Dr. Benanito is really he's the only staff member at this point in time. Once it's really up and running, he would be, the consultant for it, and there might be one individual who's helping the directors, but that's some of the stuff that we're still working on with once it's up and starting, and also making sure that grants are coming in and some of those other pieces. So we're still working on some of those other pieces. Is that a part-timer, or is that just the consultant? In Fox Valley, they do have one executive director, and they do have one other assistant who is actually working on a lot of the grants too. So we're still in our infancy on that.
Oh, I understand that. So, I mean, we're not thinking we're going to get money from the state on this.
Can make that pitch, but I don't think it's going.
Do you know okay, I just want to make sure that we weren't that naive that we thought that was coming anytime soon.
And actually, when you look at Fox Valley, a lot of their businesses that have been in place, it's been a lot of business grants that have come in, because giving back to the community and giving back to some of the others. They've also seen some grants come from the small business associations, so that's some of the grants that we would be looking at.
Would it be possible just to say yes for this for right now, but we would look at it each and every year?
We're really looking for more of the commitment, at least for the first 3 years. And again, that's why we need the ROI and all those kind of pieces. We feel that during its infancy, it will take some time, but I think at the same point in time, that's why the concern of the ROIs and some of the other pieces, it really does need the full 3 years for it to go through and see some of the success stories. And that's also going back to watching what Fox Valley did and seeing what some of the other accelerators have done over the years too.
So we have 8 people who are potentially in it, and there's 2 not. Are they proposing it to anybody else, or are we the last ones?
8 of them have been very active in it. There was one other community that started with it, but then they decided that they wanted to see what happened with the state. They also wanted to see what happens after the election, so they might come back in. We've already discussed as managers what happens if someone comes in at a later date, what their buy-in would be in at this point in time. So yes, there are some other groups watching as the accelerator develops. Originally, when this was being kicked off early on, there were a lot more municipalities who were sitting at the table for the initial kickoff meeting in Elk Grove Village.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Crumstock, is a bit of a clarification for one of the questions that Mr. Cannon asked. I know you've spoken more with them and also more recently, so things might have changed, but it's my understanding that while Rolling Meadows' contribution to the work is generally going to be like most others, where it'll not be yours for very long, that seat on the board of directors, though, is going to stay with managers because there will be business leaders added as well. But the last I heard, that seat on the board, all 8 communities' managers will be part of the board of directors. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that's one of those discussions that we're having, because there are certain managers that say once it's a mature place, they would like to take the step back if the ROIs are showing. But that is correct. At right now, at least there's a period of time that I would only have to go to the board of directors, not all these other meetings.
So then, while the work might be handed off sooner, that seat on the board could take a significantly longer period of time.
That is correct.
Okay. I feel it's just important to make that clear because I do think that's a very important element of control. And one of the things that actually made me a little bit more comfortable with it was that the managers were making a commitment to stay on the board in seats that are designated for them long enough to not just get the work started, but to ensure that it's up and running. Mm-hmm. And if that point comes later on where people start to take that step back from the board, at least as it was expressed to me, their own communities would have an opportunity to weigh in on that as well. And
that is
say,
correct.
Well, we actually think for our community, we want the manager's involvement. Other communities could say for our community, we don't. And that flexibility would be allowed later. But I believe it's very conceivable that being on the board could go longer than being the go-to person for the work contribution of Rolling Meadows. And I just feel that's an important clarification. Further discussion of this item? Mr. Prana.
I would support it, as if it gives us one more little advantage that we can bring some businesses into Rolling Meadows, then I would support it.
Further discussion? Then may I ask for the straw poll vote on this item? Those members in favor of moving forward with, we'll call it the full vote commitment of being in for the 3-year process and being a contributing member at the levels that have been expressed. Those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. That is a unanimous council. We appreciate the support from all involved. And I do believe Mr. Cannon had raised some very valid concerns, and that hopefully the minutes from tonight's meeting will provide direction down the road, not only for Mr. Crumstock, but for anybody maybe from the staff or maybe from the business community who might take that handoff from him and just kind of keep those concerns in the back of their head as they move forward. Then I believe we can close discussion on item 5 and therefore move to item 6 about the entry markers. Yeah, I was just going to say, we are at that usual time of 10 o'clock where we often take a break. I guess some people are voting with their feet, but
some people already took their own break.
Exactly. Does the council object to taking a short recess as we often do at 10 o'clock? Then with no objection, let's take a short recess.
Thank you.
sign goes back on. There it is.
Now.
So we'll call the committee of the whole meeting back to order. As we get ready for item 6, I'm going to start off a little unusually and say, Mr. Cannon, may I ask if you feel that the council is ready for this item and that the bases that were needing to be touched have been touched between the last meeting and now?
They have. Fred's been more than a gentleman trying to help me through this, and he's done a great job doing it so far.
Fair enough. We appreciate that. Then, Mr. Vogt, would you take us through item 6, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Back at the July 19th Committee of the Whole, we had a considerable discussion about entry markers, community event sign, Gateway Park signage changes. There was some follow-up with regards to needing input from council on lettering and the like, and all of that has been completed. What we realized was that back at the ad hoc committee meeting, there wasn't a clear consensus recommendation with regards to the entry markers, of which we currently have 9 of them. Presentation was made by the vendor that we had to do some design work with red brick and with white stone as being the 2 finalists in terms of design. Given that the community sign here is and has been red brick, that we've got red brick on this building, on the walls out at the corner, that the Gateway Park signage has been red brick. Staff took it upon ourselves at that July 19th meeting to say, well, for consistency purposes, the red brick would be recommended from the staff standpoint, but Alderman Cannon contacted us, I believe, early September, roughly, and said, well, there really wasn't any specific discussion or direction on that, to which he is correct. That meeting didn't give specifics with regards to the entry markers as to whether we should proceed in the future with red brick or white stone. The timing isn't of the essence now, because this would be a proposed improvement project starting in 2017, which is where, if the budget is approved for 2017, the first monies are available. We are proceeding with the community event sign and with the Gateway Park signage because there is money in the 2016 budget for that. So that's where this matter is right now, and staff is just awaiting council direction either today or at some point in the upcoming months as to what style we want those entry markers to look like. So that's our report, and turn it over to you and the council.
Then, Mr. Cannon, would you care for first comments, sir?
Sure. So I would like to get this thing solved tonight. Just so you know, I don't think anybody wants to talk about any entry markers any longer, including my own family. They don't want to bring up the subject before it hit me over the head. This really gets down to a really simple thing, in my opinion, and then people might not agree with me. I think either you like the brick or you like the stone. I don't agree that they have to match because they're not in the same place. I mean, people don't look at a sign somewhere and say, oh, that brick matches the brick downtown. I just don't think that that's the way it works. That's an opinion. I just personally think the stone sign looks a lot better. So that's why I've been pushing it. I think some other people agree with me. Maybe they don't. So that's where I'm at. I'm voting for the stone one.
I would say I agree with Alderman Cannon on all 3 counts. I think we should be able to tie this up. I also believe that different things being in different places means that there is flexibility, and I do think that the white look is more aesthetically pleasing. So I agree all across the board.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Diastis.
I agree, we should be able to get this done tonight. Personally, I like the red brick better than the white stone. It's an opinion like everyone else's. I think that there is enough of the red brick that it ties the city in, ties it together, makes it consistent. Because the theory of just because they're not next to each other doesn't mean they have to be the same. If that were the theory, then you could put a different color sign at each of the 9 different markers and say, well, they're not next to each other, so what's the difference? So it's the same philosophy. So I think it's not so much I think that there's enough of the red brick that just ties the whole city together. It's my opinion. I don't think the white stone looks bad by any means. I just think the red brick creates that consistency along with the sign.
Fair point. Further discussion around the table? Then does that mean the council is ready for the straw poll on 2 colors?
Tonight.
Tonight, as in right now. You
Please,
got it.
Please.
All right, then let's get this done. How many people paying due deference to Alderman Cannon? Let's start with the white stone. How many people are in favor of going with the white stone look? Please raise your hand. That is 4. How many people say they prefer the red brick? And that is 3. Therefore, the majority of the council goes with the white stone and by a single vote. All right, there we go. So,
We're done with it?
should I ask if anybody wants to change their vote so that they can reconsider later? Oh, wait, this is just a straw poll. So there we go, and we're done and we're finished and we can tie it up. Mr. Cannon, is that
Can I see the
satisfactory?
patterns again, please?
Mr. Cannon, is that satisfactory from your end?
I'm so satisfied I can't stand it.
Mr. Vogt, is that satisfied from the staff perspective?
It is, and that direction will move forward in fiscal year 2017 with the replacement program.
Fair enough. Then, as much as we're teasing about tying this up and being done with it, I think we should recognize that a whole lot of thoughtful consideration went in. A whole lot of work by a whole bunch of folks has kind of brought us to this point. And Mr. Cannon, we all know that this is kind of your baby that you carried forward, and I'm very pleased that it's come out with a result that you're satisfied with as well.
Thank you.
So with thanks to all involved for moving that forward, let's move the dang thing forward.
Thank you.
So we'll go on to number 7. The next 2 items are here at the request of Alderman Diastis. So Alderman Diastis, I assume you have the introduction for the Economic Development Consultant proposal.
Sure. Most of the information regarding the economic consultant is in the write-up. We heard the residents say the city needs to do something, and they were, at that time, they were talking about South Bay development, and they said they were willing to wait, but I say, how long? We had a part-time consultant, Mike Mallon, here. He worked for us for 3 years, ending in 2015, on a part-time basis. He was unable to find a grocery store, but that was his specialty. We've heard a lot of comments since then about grocery stores and anchor stores and whatnot, but we're now 10 months into 16. And we have no one that's working exclusively to promote the economic development within the city. So we've got several vacant sites. We've got several vacancies. And I think that it's time for the city council to do what the residents have asked for, and that's to deliver more economic development to fill the vacant sites and the vacancies. I think it's time for the city to invest in itself. So I am suggesting that we hire a full-time consultant. That can be a consulting agency, it could be an FTE, or it could be an outside contractor. We hire them, I suggest we budget $100,000 a year, not to exceed, for a time frame not to exceed 3 years. This way we can monitor the progress, we'll see what's happening, and at the end of 3 years we can cut it off, or we can extend it. But in the meantime, we've got several vacant pieces of property, we've got several vacancies within shopping centers, and filling these vacant pieces of property and filling these vacancies helps energize our city, helps build our property tax base, helps build our retail tax base, and can have a very positive effect for us. So if we don't do it for ourselves, who's going to do it for us? That's all I have.
Then discussion of this proposal around the table. Mr. Banger.
Thank you. We had something going on in the biggest property in the city, and we voted it down. So I don't see that this makes any sense, because we would hire somebody at great expense to the city who would bring something back to us, and if we didn't like it, or a small group of people didn't like it, all of his work could be for naught all over again. So I think this would be setting us up for just another bad experience. And I'm not interested at all. The full-time equivalent, adding somebody to staff, I'm definitely not interested in. We had Mr. Mallon, and I was always cool with that. It was part-time, and he represented us at trade shows and whatnot, and he gave account of his activities on our behalf. And once again, I've always said the market will determine what comes in there. He couldn't sway the market into getting into a lot of the vacancies in the city, and I don't think hiring somebody at $100,000 will change that either. So I wouldn't support this. Thank you.
Mr. Diaz.
Let's clarify. I said to budget $100,000. I didn't say we hire somebody for $100,000. And the position is an economic development consultant, for lack of a better word, for the city. It's not just to fill one vacancy. It's to look at all the vacancies, that the vacant property we have in Algonquin, vacant property on Kirchhoff, vacancies. It's not just to fill one piece of property. It's to go out and do what the residents said, make something happen. So it's not just to fill one property. Let's so we clarify that. It's for the entire city. And there's vacancies and vacant property throughout the city.
Further discussion around the table. Mr. Prina.
I'm all for economic development and bringing businesses into our city, and I would support things that would do this. However, I'm not sure how to approach this. This is grand theater to say we can put a Band-Aid on this and this is going to make it work. I came in here 3.5 years ago in the middle of Uncle Joe's, okay? And since that time, I've had the opportunity to meet with many of our businesses. Now, Uncle Joe came into town. They went through a great deal of struggle with this council, because there's not members here who, they may claim to be pro-business, but they're not, because they made Uncle Joe jump through hoops. And they made it very challenging, and Uncle Joe did pass by 4-3. And they did fail, but it was on their dime, not ours. And then we had Gallagher, was my next big project that I got to be involved with. We worked on that for a year. And then we had an alderman who said, well, I know numbers better than anybody else. And so even though we met one-on-one and we did all the vetting that we could, we came down to the final month, 6 weeks, and now all of a sudden there were issues. And even though Gallagher bent over backwards to try and make those issues go away, and we won't go into all the details there, but I'm just using those two examples because it's not the fact that, you know, there were members of the council that disagreed with having Uncle Joe's or disagreed with having Gallagher come into town. It's the way we treat them at this city council table, because when they do their due diligence, why would another store go, well, you know, I'm going to spend money on architects, I'm going to spend money on development, and then I'm going to come before this city council, and there are people that are going to try to do the deer in the headlights, which I saw happen over and over and over again. So then I brought up another issue as I came across here, as I said, you know, we're hiring staff, and we had a logistics coordinator, we've had other folks who are quite talented, but there seems to be a mindset for some folks on this council that we're going to hire people for 2 years, they're going to leave, and we really don't care, even though we put a lot of training and development in there. And we lose industrial knowledge, and we also lose the relationships they build up with businesses in there. So, you know, then it came down to the point is, for those of you that remember reading the staff report earlier in the year, I brought up the fact that as I go to these ribbon cuttings, you know, we are short of staff. We are short of inspectors. We can't get things processed through there. If you read the notes this week, you'll know that we do not have any of our inspectors up and running. We're looking at contracting out this week. So if you were a business in town and you're trying to get something done, I'm not sure how that's going to work, but that's where we're at right now. So we need to be able to bring people into town, but we need to be able to say we need to have someone who can expedite that. Now, the $100,000 is a nice thought, but repeatedly members of the council said, well, you know, we're not building staffing. I don't care if we hire anybody. I don't like that black hole that was Dominic's. I don't like the black hole that was by Gallagher. However, I'm not going to do anything because this is what I believe and this is what I feel. So if you want to use this $100,000 to help redevelop economic development, see how we can get it up running so when someone comes in here, we have an expediter, we have the staff to answer phones, we have the people to inspect the buildings when we can, we have somebody who's here that can help them when they have an issue, and then, you know, to a point where we become more friendly. And that's what I have heard from the number of ribbon cuttings that I've gone through this year. So it's a nice idea to put $100,000 and maybe this guy is a Pied Piper or parts the Red Sea. But if we bring him into the city and this council continues, or certain members of this council continues with their attitude of it's going to be my way or the highway, then that's where it, so I would not support this whatsoever unless it was tied in to doing an overhaul of economic development.
Further discussion among the council. Mr. Cannon.
After listening to that bunch of hooey, I guess I would, I don't know where all those thoughts came from, but that's just bizarre, some of the things that were just stated in public. I'm embarrassed to hear about them. I appreciate the attitude that Mr. Diaz has brought to the table to present this. I don't particularly agree with this particular proposal, but I do agree with the thought process behind it, and I compliment him for at least trying to move something forward. I guess what I would offer as a suggestion to go in maybe a different direction, but the same thought process is maybe, I would suggest a thought maybe that Barry and Valerie could sit together and maybe develop a strategy for how they think we should move forward, since this is really under their wing, and develop a long-term strategy or short-term strategy to begin with and a long-term one, and add the pieces that we think they need to get this done. I don't disagree that we need to do something, but I'm just not, I can't support this the way it's presented at the moment. But again, I think the way Mr. Diaz is thinking is the way a whole city needs to think. We need to see if we can do something to move things forward. Thank you.
Mrs. Majikis, then Mr. Krumstack.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, just real quick, that whoever's watching at this hour, a reminder, the city does not own this property right now to market this property. I know that's our next topic, but I'm just saying, just so people, residents that are listening are aware of the fact that we do not own this property as of this moment, so.
Mr. Krumstack.
Just for one quick clarification item, obviously since Mike Mallon has not been working for us, and again, that was a contract that we had. We have had some discussions with some other groups who would do some part-time work for us, just like what he did in the past. Obviously, we've never settled on a amount because they always wanted more. So as the Economic Development Committee knows, at some point there will be a return, and that's also why, and again, there will be a part-timer helping us again, but we do appreciate all that EDC and obviously the aldermen have done, and we hope to bring a resolution at this point in time in 2017 to the part-time position, but obviously it will be more expensive than what Mike Mallon was doing for us.
Further discussion around the table? Mr. Jed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think, the main issue I have with this is exactly what Alderman Bajikis brought up, is that we don't own the property. So we can bring X amount of people to Fritz and say, here's a grocer, here's X, here's Y, but if Fritz wants $30 a square and the market rate should be $20 a square, it's not going to lease. It has nothing to do with necessarily with the area, the building itself or anything like that. It has to do with just simple numbers, and there's enough realtors out there that probably know what's vacant in Rolling Meadows and what's not. For most practical purposes, there's reasons they're not here, and it's a lot of time has to do with the rents that they're asking. I know that there was discussion a couple of years ago with the Jewel property that they couldn't sign a deal with the post office, and they moved because they wanted too much rent. And there's a couple other places that moved out of there because they wanted too much rent. Now some have moved in there, but with us, without having control of the rent or some agreement online with an owner of a property for us to go out and market it, if we knew that we could market it and Fritz is going to go to the number that we bring forward, then it kind of makes sense. But without having that ability, I don't see how, we're going to be able to help in that capacity. And, so it's not something I can support at this time. Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Veenbos.
Well, I'm, and thank you for calling on me. I agree that something needs to be done, and I'm glad that Alderman Diaz has brought this to the table. This may not be the A answer, but I believe what the intent here is that we've heard the people of Rolling Meadows talk, and although I was supportive of the assisted living and the Dominic's property, obviously the residents wanted to go a different way. And my view of what needs to happen, maybe it's because of my business background, but if you wait for something to happen here, it isn't going to probably happen. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but we can't wait for something to happen, because guess what? Palatine, Schaumburg, Hoffman Estates has some pretty high-powered people in their organizations that are going out and getting businesses to fill their vacancies. So I think we can learn from some of them. We may not be as large, but we can learn something from our neighbors, number one. And then I believe that as we just went through this last vote, becoming a part of a group of people from an economic perspective and having part of that as being one of our tools in our tool belt, we need to create a strategy of what we want to do here. One part of it is, whoever this person is that might help pull things together. It should come through Barry, it should come through Valerie's area. We need to capture the information that we're getting from these ribbon company cuttings that I also attend. And I've heard some things that we've made right or wrong, and I'm sure there's both sides to the story, but there's ways we could make things easier for businesses to come to Rolling Meadows. And we need to learn and do some type of survey after a company goes through what we go through to get into our city and find out some facts and data from it, which you, Mr. Mayor, brought up about a few meetings ago. So we need to collect some data. We need to get a person that can go out there and hunt some information business for us. I believe we need to learn from our past bad experiences, whether it's from people that have moved into certain businesses now that we've got some negative feedback, very bad feedback, I might add. So we need to learn from that and get better. We need to have the right inspectors in place. But this, to me, all comes together with a kind of a strategy of what all the things we need to do here. And we're not going to solve it tonight, but we need to keep it on our meetings and continually talk about it and get a report every month or every meeting about what we're going to do. And, Barry, yourself, and Valerie are probably the most critical part of it. And let's do some brainstorming on what we think we can do to become better at what we're not doing. And there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of people out there that do what we do. We can learn a lot from the cities around us. But this is at least one point of it. Maybe this is not the person and the $100,000 to do it. But if I was a resident, and I am a resident, and I'm listening, I'd want this council to move forward and do something proactive and not wait for something to happen. And we need to pull this strategy together. It's got to come from Barry and Valerie as a start.
Mr. Prina.
I would agree with everything that Mr. Beanboss has said. And I was frustrated earlier, but it is because of what I hear consistently out there in the community. So, you know, Alderman Diastis brought the idea out, and, you know, it's something on the table, but we don't have a focused strategy, and we need to have a oneness in what we want for the city, and the residents do want something, and the council in the past has shown that they are not ready to do that. Maybe this would be the impetus to go forward to put that strategy together.
Further discussion? Then seeing none, we'll ask for the show of hands. All those in favor of moving forward with the proposal as it stands for budgeting up to $100,000 for an economic development consultant, please raise your hand. Those opposed? A majority of the council is opposed. Then we'll move to item number 8, also Mr. Diastis.
Thank you. Once again, this is land acquisition. I think council members may have confused the last item where I said we should buy a consultant or hire a consultant to market the city in its entirety. Several of you said, well, we don't own the property, or that's not ours. That consultant was for the whole city. This is land acquisition where many of the residents came to us and said, what can we do with that piece of property? And Ms. Majikis was correct. We can't do anything with it because we don't own it. So I am suggesting that we investigate the purchase of that property. Once we own the property, then we can decide what we want to do with it, whether we want to cut it up into sections, sell it off as a whole, whether we want to look at some of our neighbors and what they've done. And we can cite Arlington and Palatine where they've allowed high-rise multifamily condominiums to be developed in their downtown areas. Those multifamily high-rise seem to draw lots of shops and restaurants and increased the activity in their downtown areas. Once we own the property, we could investigate destination locations, stores that people drive to and that are not specifically reliant on car counts. We could investigate sporting destinations, which was some of the residents brought up. But all of this begins with this council investing in itself and saying, let's at least investigate what it costs to buy the property, and then we can develop a strategy on how we want to market it. So again, this one is focused on a single piece of property, where the other suggestion was focused on hiring a consultant for the entire city. Thank you.
Discussion on this item. Mr. Banjo.
Thank you. Once again, not interested at all. Taking this off the tax rolls, first of all, I would think is a bad move. You can look around at our neighbors, St. Charles, Libertyville. There's several cities around us who buy things and try to get into real estate. I read an article, St. Charles spent several tens of millions trying to revive their downtown. And they, like us, had a vision. They said, we want restaurants, we want condos. They settled for a bank, and this was just a few weeks ago in the paper. They settled for a bank and condos / most likely rentals. Libertyville's got that sports complex, which they're starting to piece out because it's been, well, a boondoggle in my opinion, but it's been not quite as successful as they thought it would be. So I just don't like the idea of the city getting into the real estate business, so I would never support something like this. Thanks.
Further discussion? Mr. Veenbaas.
Once again, I understand why this came up, and I agree that it's not the city's place to be a real estate development company. But this gets back to some of my earlier conversations about we've seriously got to think of a strategy for our downtown area and help businesses to fit that strategy, meaning, I mean, we've got some important votes coming up with like the fire station downtown, for example. That's going to have a great effect on how the downtown looks or doesn't look. So between the fire station, the Dominic's, and the Sam's Club out there, there needs to be some kind of a, like I said, strategy put together on what we have on our minds and what we would like to see, and based on the data that we're going to gather, or someone is going to help gather it for us. And I think at the end of the day, one of the reasons why the Dominic's property failed for independent living was maybe part of our fault as a city of the lack of education on what's going on with the market and what people will support and what they won't support as far as business owners. And it's obvious that somebody wanted to spend $18 million downtown to do something. I'm sure there's other people who will spend some money to do something downtown, and we can proactively find out what they are. But you know, it may not be what the residents ideally want, but there might be something that's similar to it that they do want, and it's our job as a council to put a strategy together to at least bring forward some of these ideas and some kind of strategy and get some kind of feedback from residents and ourselves to move forward proactively.
Mr. Judd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was opposed to the prior one for a variety of reasons. I am not opposed to at least investigating this. We had a lot of the problems with this property have come by what people have demanded over the years. And when I say people, the owners, the guy that owned it prior to, or when he had the Dominic's lease, wanted $9.8 million, got Bristol willing to pay $9.2. Their numbers didn't work, so they wanted a tax abatement. You know, Fritz came in and buys the property, and, you know, I don't know how far he's done things. I've heard that, you know, he focused primarily on grocery. I don't know if that's true or not. But, you know, if there's only so many grocers you can get, and if it doesn't go, then, you know, you figure out somebody else. And I don't know that he did that or didn't do that. That being said, you know, while I agree we're not a real estate company, nor should we be, you know, we would be able to control what's searched out. I know that at some point in time that Walmart, I forget what the name of it was, the store that they tried to put in at the bowling alley, had some conversations with them. I know that Lexington has looked into purchasing, you know, part of the property, but they don't want all of it. It would give us the ability to, if we decide we want to cut it up and say, okay, we're going to try to find somebody with a small office in this area, condos in this area, townhouses, whatever the case might be, you know, retail, it would give us the ability to look and see what that does. If Fritz is trying to sell all 11 acres, and I could understand why he'd want to do that. He doesn't want to sell 3 acres and end up with 8, or, you know, sell 5 and end up with 6, and then, you know, makes it much more difficult for him to market it. So he's probably an all or nothing. We'd have the ability to sell 2 acres, 3 acres, 5 acres, whatever we'd want to do. I think it at least has some validity to it. I think it's something we should look into and investigate. You know, we don't know. I haven't heard firm prices to what Fritz is even looking for. I don't know if he wants $10 million or 6. I think that has a little bit of, you know, what we're going to do, because we can know what's failed in the past. So I think we should at least investigate it, find out what it costs, and kind of move forward from there and make a decision. You know, we're not, if I'm reading this right, you're not advocating we buy it, you're advocating we investigate the possibility of purchasing it. So
That's correct.
I think that's something we should do and, you know, move forward from there. And if we find out it's too much, then we can always say, okay, no go. But,
Right, say goodbye.
yeah, thank you.
Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too think it's a good idea to investigate it. I think we can combine this with some of the thoughts that Mr. Veenbos laid on us earlier. I think that we kind of get the best of both those thought processes. I think it'd be just good for all of us. Make us all think more, make us think it through. Maybe we can start developing a strategy on our own. So I think, again, I support Mr. Diastis for bringing it forward. I compliment him for doing it. And I think at minimum, we should look at it, at minimum. Thank you.
Further discussion? I would say that my own opinion is I don't believe it's a realistic enough possibility that the city would actually do it to spend the time, energy, and effort. But I certainly understand that if folks really thought it was a possibility, then perhaps they feel it should be investigated. But I personally don't. I don't see this coming out in any way, shape, or form with the city being in control of the property. You know, I don't investigate the cost of Jaguars because I know I don't have the money to buy one right now. And whatever this property is going to cost, that money is not sitting around. That money has all kinds of, meaning future money has all kinds of ideas like moving fire stations and so forth and so on, that it's already kind of spoken for multiple times over what it could be. I just don't see this being the end result, and so I personally don't see a reason to investigate something that I don't believe will happen. But I will grant that if somebody actually really believes that the city should go ahead and buy this property and could make it happen, well, that's a logical reason to support investigating it. I just don't share it. Mr. Cromstock.
Just a thought. Obviously, investigating will be very interesting because we might have to do it legally or some other way because you just can't. We've already had some discussions in the past where we've tried getting the ballpark of what the number is going to be. So even if we come back with a number, who knows if that's going to be a true number, if that's going to be an appraisal number or something like that. So be aware that investigating might even be very difficult for us, but if that's the motion that it's going to go to, it has a little concerns with it and the staff side.
Further discussion? Is the council ready for the straw poll? Then those in favor of investigating, starting the first steps toward what would it take for the council to perhaps purchase the property, please signify by raising your hand. That's 3. Those opposed? And that is 4. So a majority of the council says that this shall not move forward. Coming to the last item of the night, Mr. Cannon, this item is yours. You're entitled to the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brought up the subject a couple years ago. I'm bringing it back again. I hope people had a chance to read my note. I would ask everybody, before they give final consideration to this, to not think of it in their personal terms, in the sense that I think this position deserves more compensation than it receives right now. You know, we constantly compare ourselves to other cities, and if that's the case, one can make a solid argument that we're way underpaid. I think most of our residents have really no idea of how we're compensated or what we're. I'm told on a number of bases what I have for staff and what kind of an office I have. I'm sure others at the table are also confronted with the same kind of thoughts. It's humorous. It is humorous. I assure people that no, we don't get any expense money, and I'm not advocating that we change any of the things other than just the general compensation. You know, we don't get paid for mileage. We don't get paid for phone calls at all hours of the days and night. I think we all do our job happily. But I think the job, after 17 years, deserves some financial acknowledgement, that we deserve more money than we're getting right now. I purposely didn't put a number in there because last time I got slammed because I put a number in. So I just thought, if people either agree with the thought process or not, I guess the one comment I wouldn't like to hear is that, well, I don't really need the money, so therefore that's what it should stay at. It shouldn't be about you individually. What is this position worth? What's the expectations of when a person decides he wants this job or she wants the job? What does it take to get the job and finance your own campaign, go about doing it, pay for your gas to run around town, sometimes deal with some greedy, angry residents, try to work with staff through problems that we all confront in our wards. I can tell you from one thing that I've been told by a number of people. Again, we're compared with our neighbors all the time sometimes, but it seems like when it comes to ourselves, we're not supposed to do that. I'm told that the compensation for people in a similar position, us in Palatine, is $11,000, and they get $25 for every meeting they go to, whether it's a council meeting or a committee meeting. So that's just my initial feedback. I also have one amendment that I'd like to add that I didn't put in there. This was brought to my attention by another councilman, but it's something I would add. I also would like, for future compensation, that we all get a name badge with our name on it. So when we go to meetings, people know who we are, and they don't look like, say, hey, where do you work, buddy? What the hell are you doing here? So that would just be an amendment that I would add to it as a second thought. So that's just, that was brought up by another member who's a very esteemed member of the council. I won't bring him his name because he would punch me if I did.
I certainly think the council can spring for name tags. Thoughts on this proposal? Mr. Banger.
Thank you. I don't view this other than personally, so it's hard to step out of that role. But I will say to Mr. Cannon that just my view on this level of, I would almost term it grassroots level of elected representative that we are, I almost view it as baseball coaching or something. It's a civic. I felt it's a civic duty, and I feel honored to be a representative of the 5th Ward. I felt honored to get elected the first time and reelected last year. So it's more or less the duty aspect than the money aspect. I remember I walked over to my neighbor Glenn Adams' place a few weeks before the election, and at that during that conversation, I learned, oh, we actually get paid for that, because I actually was under the impression it was a volunteerism sort of thing. So I'm more into any compensation is I guess adequate, just because I enjoy the role more than anything that it comes with. So I guess bottom line, I wouldn't support any increase in compensation. Thanks.
Further discussion? Mr. Meanbus.
I think it's worth looking at. I mean, we're all not doing this for the money, that's for sure. So, if we need to keep up with the times for the next guys that take our spots and the rest of it, I'm fine with it.
Mr. Cannon.
I guess I would just add a little caveat. I had asked for this to be done 3 or 4 months ago, and it couldn't get on until now. There is a time frame thing here. If someone, just to refresh people, if we change compensation at all, it's potentially no one at this table would receive a dime. It would be after you're reelected or elected to a position to begin with. So for many of us, it's many years away. For even the closest guys or girls, it would be April or May, I guess. May would be the soonest anything would happen. And I guess the one thing I did forget in here, I also would think that the mayor's position should be paid more money also. But I guess the bottom line is, if we decide that this is a reasonable idea, I guess I would make a proposal with some discussion as to what levels they would change to tonight. Because we need to come with a proposal to the next meeting, because we only have 180 days.
I would offer as a point of clarification to one of the things that Mr. Cannon said. He is correct that an intervening election has to happen before anybody could get any increase in compensation. So going back all those years to the last time something happened, It was the even-numbered wards, which happened to be occupied by Mr. Diastis and I at the time, where we sat there and waited 2 whole years while everybody else got the increased amount. We were still at the old amount for 2 years longer than everybody else. That would be the same again. So 1, 3, 5, 7 all have to hang on until 2019, whereas 2, 4, 6 and the new mayor would be able to take advantage of that. I'm not meaning that as a pejorative term, only after the April election and only after they were sworn in for their May terms. So it would actually be a staggered thing depending on when you get elected next. Further discussion? Mr. Judd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this makes a certain degree of sense. You know, we all have, you know, family, and, you know, when we take time away from our family, whether you're doing it to, you know, do your job or you're commuting or whatever the case might be, it's still time away from your family. And when we're dealing with, you know, the reading the packets and whatnot, you know, and we're here, 4 hours tonight almost. So, you know, it's not so much the actual dollar per se, it's more the principle behind it. And, you know, we've given, I believe, close to 2% raises for the last 4 years, 5 years to all the employees. And part of that is, you know, for that same basis. You know, obviously there's a lot of other things as well, but part of it's that same basis. So I don't think, you know, a small raise is out of the question or shouldn't be considered. So, thank you.
Further discussion? For my part, I stand where I stood before. I am strongly opposed to any increases in the straight compensation that the council gets, but as I stood before, I think it's the proper application of incentives and getting people to do stuff that if the council is willing to consider some form of stipend for meetings that are attended as part of organizations that people are assigned to represent outside the city for the council, specifically meaning things like JAWA, specifically meaning things like the O'Hare Noise Commission, specifically meaning things like those, and specifically excluding the Northwest Municipal Conference, which I discussed last time. That's something you expect comes with the mayor's chair, so it shouldn't be included. But quite frankly, it's hard to get people to go to JAWA. That's why I'm stuck going. And it's hard to get people, isn't it, Mr. Cannon, to go to the O'Hare Noise Commission and so forth and so on. And a proper application of what I teach says if you can't get people to do it, then that's what needs the compensation. This table is full. The JAWA table is not. And the O'Hare Noise Commission is not. And so that's where I draw the dividing line between the two. So the only form of increased compensation I would be willing to support would be for the outside duties that do require a more significant investment of time, energy, and effort. Further discussion around the table? Any further discussion? Then we'll start with just simply the basic broad brushstrokes of what Mr. Cannon presented, just simply saying how many people are in favor of looking at some form of increase in city council compensation. Is that fair enough as a phrasing? That is 4. How many people are opposed to looking at an increase in council compensation? That is only 3. So a majority of the council has given direction to at least have the next discussion that Mr. Cannon mentioned, that if we reach that point, perhaps to bring something forward, people have to talk about dollar amounts and so forth and so on. I would remind everybody as they move forward along those lines, that's 4 votes here as a straw poll. And that's enough to move things forward. It does take 5 to override a mayoral veto later on down the road. So you might want to if this is something you're interested in, make sure it's something that you could get somebody else to accept, because I'm saying I'm strongly opposed. So I think it could have discussion this evening if it only took a little while. If it should wait for a later council meeting because we think it'll go a while, that's okay. I'm open to either one, but what do we think the increase that would be brought forward in ordinance form should take? It's straight $4,000 for aldermen at the moment. Mr.
I'd like to wait and think on it and come up with a number, because I didn't have a number in mind.
That's a perfectly reasonable option to say we'll bring that up at a later council meeting now that there's been direction by the council. I don't have any objection to that. Mr. Cannon, you're the one who made the proposal. Is that okay? As people talk about what kind of number? They were October 25th, first reading. So there would have to be a first reading by October 25th.
Right. That's why I had to do it tonight.
Because this is the deadline. It's 180 days before the before they get sworn in, which would be the first meeting in May. So in order for it to happen for the next election, it would have to happen by then.
Goodness gracious.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm willing to wait. I guess I would go back, 2 years ago, you made the statement when I brought this up that now wasn't the time because we couldn't afford it. So
I beg your pardon.
Well, I thought that's what you said.
I suggest you read the minutes.
What did you say then? I guess you said now was not the time.
I beg your pardon. I said I was adamantly opposed, and I remain adamantly opposed.
Okay, I misunderstood that.
I haven't changed a single thing, sir.
That's fine. I said, I'm sorry.
So I guess if it has to have a first reading next week, there's not time to go away and think. We would have to come up with a dollar figure that could be proposed for first
I'm willing to
reading
wait
next week.
because obviously you're against it. So, I'm not, it's ridiculous to have a fight about it because it's not supposed to be a fight.
I don't believe that's a helpful attitude at this point.
Okay.
I believe that 4 people have given adequate council direction. I'm willing to make a proposal work. I was about to point out that October 25th is merely the first reading. So if you guys come up with a dollar figure, it can be amended, it can be changed, it can be further talked about over the next 2 weeks between the first reading and the second reading. I believe my comments are not giving any reason to pout. And so I think it would be helpful for the 4 people to have a discussion as to what dollar amount they would want to propose in an ordinance. If we're going to throw up our hands and say we can wait, then that means this will not happen at all. And I don't think that was the approach of the council. So let's try to discuss this all as adults and come as something that could be brought forward, please. Would anybody like to suggest an amount that could be put in the ordinance to be brought forward for first reading next week? Mr. Judd.
I'll throw something out just because. It'll be 6 and 12.
6 and 12 meaning 6,000 for aldermen and 12,000 for the mayor's salary.
Right, it's 10 and 4 now, right?
Roughly speaking, yes.
Right, because that won't impact you get something for liquor or something, right?
Yeah, liquor commissioner does have a separate.
Then you need to be careful because the mayor's compensation of $9,970 puts together the mayor's salary and the liquor commissioner. So that is all in for the mayor position. So if you are saying 6,000 for alderman and 12,000 for mayor, that means all in for the mayor is 13,000 something because it's only 70.
I thought it was 10,000 and 4,000, and I thought the liquor stuff was, so if it's 10,000 all in right now, make it 12,000 all in?
That's certainly sufficient as clarification.
We're 4,000 all in, right?
That is certainly clarification that I'm willing to accept.
We're 4,000 all in right now?
Correct.
Okay, so 6 and 12.
So
all in.
6,000 for the alderman and 12,000 all in for the mayor is a clarification that I find helpful. Thank you. Is there any objection from the folks who want this brought forward to bringing forward those amounts, knowing that you can amend them, knowing that you can change them at the first reading. You can even change them at the second reading if it helps the process. Is there any objection to bringing forward $6,000 for the mayor, or excuse me, $6,000 for the alderman and $12,000 all in for the mayor's position? All right, then if there's no objection, I guess we have to bring forward a first reading of an ordinance 1 week from tonight that would have those dollar figures. Madam Deputy City Clerk, I believe that's sufficient time to prepare something in time?
It's right there.
Well, okay, Mr. McCall, is that sufficient to bring something forward by the agenda that needs to be published on Friday and all the rest? All right, he says absolutely. I believe only semi-facetiously. So that concludes item number 9, I believe, unless there's further discussion. Is there anybody who wants to add outside stipends to this to be put on the agenda with the ordinance? Is there anybody who's interested in that? Then seeing nobody who's interested, it'll just be straight 6 and 12, and it'll be discussed next week, at least at a first reading.
Mr. Mayor, how about a jar of honey as increased stipend?
Two mentions of beekeeping.
Oh, is that right? 2 in the same night? I must have missed the first one.
Oh,
All right,
very
fair
early.
enough. Well, I do believe that concludes item number 9, and I believe item number 9 is the last item on the agenda. Therefore, without objection, this committee of the whole will be adjourned. Is there any objection? This committee of the whole is adjourned.
7 o'clock.